All right, everybody. How you doing? It's News Debate. I am Lee back with another show. December is content month. Doing as many shows as I possibly can this December because of some wonderful patreon.com/NEWZ debate contributions, namely from Patrice, but also great people like Ron and Apostate Nate, Frankie, Lola, Shannon, Mojo, Sneaky Elbow, Natasha, Nick, MC Funk, Bjorn, and Glenn. Be like them if you want to be an instant co-host and support the program over on patreon.com/NEWZ debate. It is News Debate. I want to say hi to Patrice and Ron, two of those Patreon supporters. Also, new friend of the show, Professor D. D does not stand for what you think it stands for. At least it's not what I thought it stands for. I want to hear your hot takes. We had a fantastic gun debates on yesterday's program. You can check that out on twitch.tv/NEWZ debate and also rumble.com/user/NEWZ debate. And as my recorded audio Twitter space at twitter.com/NEWZ debate. I'm going to try something different today. I'm going to start each show with just a list of stories that I'm kind of following that maybe we'll get to by the end of the show, but sort of just to generate some ideas. Once again, that Wisconsin Christian school shooting that we talked about on yesterday's show, police are continuing to search for answers. There are some updates, but not a whole lot. The Supreme Court, apparently, I think it's not just that they're being requested, but I think they will actually hear TikTok's plea to avoid being banned in the United States. That's coming up here in a bit. The U.S. Senate has passed a nearly $900 billion defense bill that, for some reason, in a defense spending bill, also contains a restriction for gender affirming, or as I would say, gender altering care. That's somehow included in the defense bill. Also, some updates on Luigi Mangione, the United Healthcare CEO assassin. Apparently, prosecutors may not have the slam dunk case you think they would for someone who was caught on video, shooting someone in the back and basically is completely guilty of that, because a lot of people have sympathy for Luigi Mangione. And so they're not sure that maybe the case is going to be as big of a slam dunk as you think it will be. Indiana has executed its first inmates in 15 years who apparently said, let's get this over with. And also, finally, here, a woman who donated a kidney many years ago to someone in need, she needed her own kidney eventually. And last month, she received a kidney from a pig. This has happened a few times. I don't know, the last year or two. Those people died, but apparently this woman is in better health condition when the transplant took place. And so they're thinking maybe she might actually make it through there. And that's my poll over on Stereo. I'm live on Twitter Spaces, also live over on Stereo. So I would take the pig kidney, or even if I die without it, hell no. My vote, I would take the pig kidney. Question remains, though, what if you are Jewish? What if you are Muslim? Do you got a cow kidney? I don't. How does that work? So it's a news debate. I am Lee. I'd love to hear your thoughts. I want to hear your hot takes. Professor D requests to speak. Patrice, you are joining us here at the top of the show. How are you doing today?
I am doing very well, Lee.
Gosh darn it. I'm so,
Oh, wow, your voice changed.
oh
What?
my goodness. I'm so sorry. Um, I'm doing great. It was a busy work day, and now I'm drinking a latte and relaxing. Relaxing.
Just a
Here I
straight
am
latte. There's
in
not
all
like any
my glory.
bourbon in that latte. Not a little something something.
No, I don't drink top shelf. Uh, No, I don't like it. I never have, especially tequila. That's why I don't go to Mexico anymore.
Well, among other reasons, maybe, but okay. Lee, I don't like tequila, and therefore I do not go to Mexico. Okay, I feel there's a joke in there. Also want to welcome to the
Mhm.
show Glenn. Glenn joining us up from Canada. How you doing, Glenn?
I'm good.
Are you also enjoying
But
a latte?
no, I'm on a sober Wednesday.
So your
I'm having a
lattes usually have bourbon, so you can't drink it because you're sober today?
well, normally my drinks like vodka, but today it's not vodka. Today it's just pop.
Oh
I'll
wow.
probably have a joint at some point though.
You say pop. Question. So is today Sober Wednesday for a reason? Is this a movement I'm not aware of? I know like No Shave November, but Sober Wednesday? I've never heard of that.
Oh well, I actually it's just because I have like 4 days off, and so like I'm delaying my gratification with alcohol. Whereas that I'll do that when I'm just not working, instead of blowing all my money now and then having no money to drink when I have nothing else going on.
Okay, I like
Trying to
this
be
plan. So if I
mature-ish.
understand correctly, you're going to have a big 4-day break and you want to get really crunk. So rather than getting a
Oh, I don't
little
know about
wasted
that.
now, you're going to get really super duper wasted for 4 days.
Well, I mean, like the liquor stores are like super busy then, so like I just don't want to go there. So I'd rather just buy my booze like Friday, and then I don't have to worry about it Sunday to Wednesday.
Now let's talk about that. In Canada, I believe your weed and also your booze are government stores, right?
Uh, our booze isn't now. Our booze is uh community-run cooperative
But
business.
like in the US, you could pick up, I guess it depends on the state, but you could pick up some alcohol at a gas station, convenience store. You could pick up alcohol at a grocery
Well,
store. But like in Canada, isn't it a different system?
well, I mean, we have drive-through liquor stores and shit, but but that's like
Yes,
off
you
sale.
have
It's
drive-through
not
liquor
too
stores,
expensive.
but the liquor stores are separate liquor stores. It's not like you get liquor at a gas station or beer at a gas station.
No, no, it's a different store.
Now,
You get your gas and your cigarettes, but you
okay,
can't get your weed
that was my
at that
question.
store.
So your cigarettes you could get other places, but your weed and your alcohol, those are separate stores.
Yeah. Now that you point that out, that is messed up. They should have like an all-in-one. You want to die
Well, I
early in
don't
life?
know of
Go to this store. They sell all the
I don't
things that
know
are
of
going
a
to kill you.
single all-in-one in the US, but because especially weed stores usually have like a separate door. It's kind of like a bank or something. But most places in the US, unless there's a real specific reason why not, yeah, you can buy different types of alcohol and tobacco and even groceries at the same store.
Yeah, I mean, like the liquor store and the weed store are like 25 steps away from each other in most places, so it's really
Makes
not that big of
sense.
a deal. Yeah. And the gas station's not far from that either. So it's, everything's kind of right there for you.
I guess the big difference is when you have so much freedom in the United States, well, we don't make you go to separate stores. I guess there's the benefit right there. Freedom isn't free, everybody. You got to walk more in Canada.
Yeah, but like if you have babysitting account, each one of those little pricks is like $560 a month. So
Yeah, we've talked about that. When you and now your former were you ever married?
no, no.
Your former
We weren't even
girlfriend.
interested. Yeah.
You were having some kids, and I discovered I had no idea Canada pays you for children.
Yeah, I actually up until like the second one, I wasn't aware of the amount either. I kind of kept my head in the sand because I wasn't getting it. Also, I found out I was like, huh, I need some titties and a vagina because I could get paid.
All right. Well, Glenn, you'll have to stay in Canada to get those sort of things that you were not born with. Because as I mentioned, when I was talking about some stories I'm paying attention to, we just passed in the US Senate about a $900 billion defense bill. Okay, that's a story on its own. Somehow, that also included restrictions on gender affirming, or as I would say, altering care in the United States. So be happy you're in Canada because I think our defense bill might not allow that kind of thing.
Well, actually, I was at work, and you know how like there's that saying like chicks with dicks, and I was
We are
saying
going
that
into
like that,
some dark territory here, Glenn.
just wait, just wait, just wait. For those that are easily triggered, they might have an easier time handling a dude with boobs. Just saying. I'm not
Okay.
offended by it. I don't care.
So if you've heard of
Listen,
chicks with have you heard of dudes with boobs?
I
A
mean,
new
they don't even
movement
have to
that
be.
Glenn is going to start.
They can just be fat.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, they're just overweight. They don't have to have surgery.
Yeah, no surgery necessary. Just like sit on my couch watching football every day of the week.
Dudes with boobs. Really, really appreciate that, Glenn. You know, some people are like Einstein and they come up with theories of relativity. Not you. You come up with dudes with boobs. Martha, who's joining us over on Twitter, has tweeted drinking wine is like a good nap in a bottle. It makes everything feel better. And you wake up wondering where the time and the cheese went. Yeah. So, Glenn, you have 4 days coming up here. Have you thought about a little bit of wine? Or are you going for anything specific? You said vodka, right?
I am a vodka guy. I'll probably dabble with Bailey's though, because drinking vodka at 11 a.m. is just I feel some sort of way about myself doing that. But if it's Bailey's, I feel like that is entirely acceptable. My own personal belief system there. So no wine. Although when I did drink wine before, it actually makes the weed taste like way better, and the weed makes the wine taste better. It was the most
Oh, so you're
insane pairing
pairing
ever.
rather than really nice dinner or a dessert or some cheese, you're
I
pairing
pair it with
wine with weed.
a nice sativa. Yeah. A nice Chardonnay with a nice sativa. Mwah.
Madame, sir, welcome to this restaurant. Could I interest you in some sativa with wine? Horrible,
Oh,
horrible
accent.
accents. All right, so it's News Debate. I'm Lee. We got Glenn and we have Patrice. These are our patreon.com/NEWZ debate co-hosts. So if you guys have a specific hot take that you want to talk about, go ahead and raise your hand. For the time being, a friend of the show, Professor D, is also joining us. You have your hand up. Do you have something either to add about pairing wine with delicious sativa, or do you have a hot take of your own?
I have a hot take, and that hot take is I don't like alcohol.
Okay, so let's discuss this. Is it that you don't drink? Is it that there's something that prevents you from drinking, like a religion or something? Or is it just that you don't
No.
specifically like alcohol?
I mean, I was one of those people who, like in my early 20s, I saw people at the bar drinking and getting drunk, and I always thought it was something I had to do. Especially, and I don't mean to, like at gay bars, like that's like a big thing, like drinking and socializing, and I just always thought that that's what I have to do. And so I would drink, and I realized that I didn't like waking up in the morning hungover. I didn't like spending all my money on it. I didn't like, I don't even like the way it burns going down my throat. It feels like I'm swallowing swords. And so I
But
just
wouldn't that be
decided,
like hard alcohol? It doesn't burn if you just drink beer, right? Or
well,
wine doesn't beer.
I also don't like sacrificing my inhibitions. because I, keep my poker face. And if I'm drunk, I can't keep my poker face. I try, but I can't. So I just settle on a plant that I think should be legalized, and keep it at that.
Okay, so did you say you live in like one of the Carolinas?
I do.
So I don't know for sure, but my guess is they don't have recreational weed there.
They don't, but I do predict maybe within the next decade they will, because I do believe that we are warming up to marijuana usage in this country. And so I guess that, well, I don't want to derail the topic. I was going to say that I support the legalization of marijuana as a topic of debate, but we need to keep it into the news. So I'm just going to let someone else speak.
Well, you
and
don't
if I
have
can
to.
think,
I mean, we could talk about marijuana. We've talked about that on the show. Marijuana is like abortion. You type in recreational marijuana on some sort of news site, there'll be an update. Just like there's always an update on abortion or the death penalty.
Now, the death penalty, I don't agree with. Now, that's a hot take. I don't agree with the death penalty. And people in my family think I'm crazy for that. They're like, why not? And I'm like, I just don't. Obviously, I have more reasons than that, but I don't know. I just feel like I think in very, very severe cases, the death penalty should be employed. Like if we're dealing with a serial killer like Albert Fish, who I'm not even going to talk about the things he did, but he did horrific things. Yes, I do believe he should be killed. But I'm very picky. I don't know. I just feel very strange about the government making a decision on who died.
This is good, Professor D. So smoke it if you got it. We're going to come back to this. I want to talk about the death penalty because there is a story I mentioned at the top of the show. Someone was just executed in Indiana. But patreon.com/NEWZ debate supporter and co-host Glenn has his hand up. I feel like he feels attacked when you said so many things anti-alcohol. Glenn seems like he's really into the booze. Glenn, what's your point?
By the way, hold on. By the way, I'm not anti-alcohol. I'm not alcohol. Alcohol for the people. Go ahead.
Okay, so he's not anti-alcohol for you, just for himself.
Yeah, it sounded absolutely like a personal choice, which is totally cool, and he had good reasoning for having his personal choice. However, I had one point to make. So, like, he says he doesn't like the way it burns going down. And I was thinking to myself, it's like minus 35 right now. That burn is the only thing that's keeping me warm outside. And I have one other observation. I'm going to say that Professor is a true crimes guy because he knows so much about different criminals. It's crazy. He's obviously a true crimes fan.
Yeah, no, that is true. Like, you'll be like, children's toys. And he'll be like, oh, yes, like the 1982 serial killer who left a child's toy next to every one of his victims. Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay. Yeah, he does have a little bit of that going on. That's fair, Glenn. That's fair. Okay, so we have Professor D. Let's talk about the death penalty. That's a story I'm following. We also have Reggie has joined us as a speaker, and he has been posting about the gender affirming, or as I would say, altering care restriction that's in the defense spending bill for some reason. And yes, I'm aware of the details. I haven't gotten into them yet because I was waiting for a hot take on it. So that's our plate right now. We're going to go with death penalty, Professor D. Then we're going to do Reggie. And in the meantime, if Glenn or Patrice, as my Patreon co-hosts, have first choice, if you guys have one, feel free to throw it out. So let's do this. Let me get this story from USA Today. Oh, also, stocks have taken a huge dive in the U.S. That's another story. I'm getting alerts about that as we do the show right now. All right, so I'm sharing this over on twitch.tv/NEWZ debate and also rumble.com/user/NEWZ debate. Also, if you're over on stereo, leave a voice message. Right now, I would take a pig kidney is winning over on the stereo poll. The state of Indiana has executed its first inmate in 15 years as Joseph Edward Corcoran. Sounds like an assassin. Assassin always has the three names. Was declared dead before sunrise. That's Old Westy. Before sunrise on Wednesday morning. The 49-year-old was convicted in 1999 for the 1997, 2 years after, quadruple murder of his older brother, sister's fiance, and their two friends. I can understand why they wanted to kill this guy. He committed the homicides with a semi-automatic rifle. Okay, it's like our discussion yesterday. And at the home he lived in with his older sister and brother in Fort Wayne, Indiana. Okay, so he lived with them, ended up killing him. He was 22 at the time. Killed his older 30-year-old brother and his sister's fiance, who was also older, and their two friends. Everyone was around 30 years old, about 8 years older than him. Took them all out. Before his execution, his attorneys filed a request for the Indiana Supreme Court asking them to consider his client's competency because he was diagnosed as a paranoid schizophrenic in 1999. But the court denied that request. So they were not saying he was innocent. Oftentimes, when we discuss these death row appeals, someone has claimed they are innocent from the day they were put in jail. And they've never changed their story. They say, I'm innocent, I'm innocent. Not this guy. He was given a lethal dose of pentobarbital, a drug separately used to manage seizures and insomnia. As you pump in enough of that, takes you down. Corcoran delivered his final words before taking his last breath. Not really. Let's get this over with, he said. Okay. So once again, not saying he's innocent, not expressing remorse. Not really. Let's get this over with. The governor of Indiana said the man's case has been reviewed repeatedly over the last 25 years, including 7 times by the Indiana Supreme Court and 3 times by the U.S. Supreme Court. His sentence has never been overturned and was carried out by order of the courts. The Attorney General of Indiana said the man finally paid his debt to society as justice was provided to his convictims. Yeah, I'm not sure there's anything. I mean, this seems like this guy killed 4 people, and some of them were family. Okay, here we go. The older sister of this man, in a Facebook post on December 2nd, wrote that she was too naive, self-absorbed, and uneducated to recognize her brother's paranoid schizophrenia 27 years ago. I could have known better, she wrote. She has forgiven her younger brother, despite him killing her fiance over 2 decades ago. She wrote that I believe the death penalty does not address grief or provide true justice, especially for victims and those with mental illness. It fails to bring closure or relief, as I believe there is no such thing as closure. Instead, it is a lengthy, costly, and political process. My views on the death penalty have evolved as I've matured. But in 1997, she told reporters, everything's gone. He's ruined my life. I hope he fries. But now says, quote, his execution serves no purpose. So that is okay. That's the most interesting thing about this story is that guy killed his sister's fiance and 3 other people. At first she says, well, go to hell. I hope you fry. But this month does not support the death penalty. And could have, says she, that she could have recognized her brother's mental health issues, but did not at the time. Patrice writes, I wonder if he ordered a cheeseburger or a ribeye as his last meal. Yeah, last meals for death row inmates are fascinating. Doesn't say anything about his meal here. We got nothing about his meal, unfortunately. But we do know that he said, let's get it over with right before he died. Martha over on Twitter writes, the death penalty, unfortunately, stands as a solemn reminder that some transgressions demand an irreversible reckoning. Ooh, yeah, irreversible reckoning. Good words. Justice, after all, is not merely a concept, it is an uncompromising action. Irreversible reckoning. All right, that's a good one. So, Professor D, this is your hot take. Well, what do you think about this? Should this guy who killed 4 people, including 2 of his blood relatives, have been executed? Is that enough serial killery for you, or do you think that this was not a good idea?
Well, it depends on, I try to think about this from the victim's family's point of view because I can understand, like, a lot of people will say to me, like, well, what would you want if someone killed your mother? And my response, though, is like, well, death seems like a really easy way out for some things. Like, I feel like that, or if you're going to do the death penalty, do it like they do in Japan. In the East, they have this thing where if you are on death row, they don't tell.
They use a sword in Japan?
No.
Oh, sorry.
Well, they used to, but in the East, what they'll do is the day of your execution, they won't tell you what the day is. So you just sit there, and then one day they're like, all right, it's time to get hung. And in my opinion, I think if we are going to have the death penalty, it should be something like that. I feel like death is too easy of a way out for certain crimes. Now, some may argue that that's cruel and unusual to make somebody just wait unknowingly. It's a really, well, let me ask you, do you think that the guy should have been executed?
Yeah, I'm pretty okay with this one. Yeah, pretty okay with this one.
But hey, remind me though, did he abuse children in any way in this crime?
I have not found that. It looks like he murdered people who were about 8 to 10 years older than him. 2 of them relatives, everyone known to each other, and no mention of kids.
Okay, because when we start dealing with children, that's when I'm like, okay, maybe we need to enforce this. But even in a case where a child is killed, and look, I believe Casey Anthony did it. I'm sorry, I believe she did it. But what if? There's always that what if, and the reason I bring up Casey Anthony is because she was facing capital punishment. I still think the bitch did it, but still, there's that like, what if? And do you know what I'm saying? Like, but no, I believe the bitch did it. But my point is, whenever there's a child involved, that's when I start feeling a little bit more iffy. No, when I start supporting the guillotine. So, by the way, I wanted to tell you this. I was going to comment it, but now that I have the mic, and I'll let someone else speak after I conclude my thought, and anyone can respond to whatever I've just said. Eileen Wuornos, who was, you know who she is. She was a serial killer who killed people.
Glenn, are you hearing this? Look at this. True crime.
No,
True crime,
so this
D.
is interesting.
Lee,
Eileen
I got the microphone. Let me tell you about my other favorite serial killer. Yes, please continue.
No, it's relative. She her final meal was a cigarette and a cup of black coffee. And say what you want to, that's metal as fuck. Can I say fuck on here? I'm sorry.
Well, a little too late now. Yeah, no, you can't. That is, yeah. I feel like that's a wasted meal, but I do like the boldness of the cigarette and coffee. Now, if the coffee had cream, that kind of ruins it. But if it was just black coffee and a cigarette, especially if it was like a cigarette with no filter, either a hand-rolled cigarette or one of those cowboy killers, the Camel no filters or whatever. It's a shorter pack because there's no filter taking up the space. Okay. What did she do? What was she in jail for?
She would kill people. She was a sex worker who would kill men, and at first she was claiming it was self-defense, but then later on was like, nope, I did it because I wanted to. So, I mean, she said it. She said, I wanted to kill those. You don't know Eileen Wuornos?
I'm not a true crime nut, so no, I don't. I can't name all these different serial killers.
Well, what's her name? She played Megyn Kelly in Bombshell. She played what is her name? Charlize Theron. She played Eileen Wuornos, and the makeup is impeccable. Like it does not
Wait, time
look
out.
like Charlize Theron.
You mean is that Monster?
Yes, Monster Eileen Wuornos. That's
so
her.
I've heard of that movie. I didn't know that was her. Okay, I've seen a couple clips of that movie, and that was the lady who wanted just a cigarette and black coffee.
Yeah, because she was crazy and metal as fuck. But again,
metal
sorry.
As fuck.
Anyway.
Really quickly,
anyway,
though,
I want to hear
Professor D. Since you have mentioned Japan, I had never heard of this, so I wanted to look it up. But damn, you are correct. Japan informs death row inmates of their execution date, but only on the morning of the execution. This practice is part of Japan's highly secretive approach to capital punishment. It's like a ninja capital punishment. Inmates are typically told only a few hours before their execution takes place. Families are usually informed afterward. This method has been criticized by human rights organizations as inhumane, as it subjects prisoners to prolonged periods of uncertainty and psychological stress. However, Japan continues to defend its capital punishment system as necessary for justice and deterrence. And if only they also used some sort of like ninja sword. That's about the only way that could be more metal. Yeah. Okay. Glenn, your hand is up, and then we're going to jump over and hear from Reggie. Glenn, your perspective.
So, like coffee, black coffee and a cigarette smell as fuck. I have to say that Japan's totally ninja as fuck. That was it.
My guess is Japan does not execute a lot of people, so maybe that's why they're able to keep this up if it's only one person every so often. If they executed as many people as we do, something tells me maybe that wouldn't be the case. But if it's, if it's an actual, holy cow, they're executing someone today in Japan, I guess it works. I kind of like that, though, to be honest. It's not torturing someone, but it is effing with them. And I wonder how that plays out. So if you in the US, if you are convicted of a crime and then sentenced to death, it takes usually a couple decades, something like that, to kill you, because you have automatic appeals, you have all these other things. It just takes a long time. And as we've discussed on the show, it takes more money to kill someone than to let them live the rest of their life behind bars, because you have to pay for all of these appeals. They keep them in a special part of the prison. It just is more expensive to execute someone in the United States than leave them in jail for the rest of their life. On top of all that, imagine if we didn't tell you when you were being executed. So maybe you'd think, okay, on average, it's going to be 25 years from now. But you'd have to be really quick with your appeals, because when you know when you're getting executed, you're like, okay, we got a calendar. First, we're going to do this. And the last thing, we'll take it to the Supreme Court. If you don't know exactly when, you got to do your homework first. Martha is asking me over on Twitter, do you mean samurais? Japan has ninjas. Ninjas are also in Japan, right? Feel like, where did ninjas come from? I'll ask ChatGPT. Where Ninjas are also Japanese. They have to be. Was I lied to by Hollywood? Yes. Originated in feudal Japan in the 14th century. Hakia. And that's why they should honor that part of their history by executing people with a ninja sword. News debate, I'm Lee. Okay. Barring someone having a hot take related to the death penalty, we're going to move over to Reggie. And Reggie wanted to talk about, oh, hey, it's Apostate Nate. Well, let's bring Apostate Nate up here and hear from him. Sorry, Apostate Nate. I originally invited you as a speaker, like I always do, and usually that lets you just join automatically. But of course, Elon doesn't always work. So, Apostate Nate, you are a speaker. How you doing right now?
I'm doing good, Lee. I completely forgot about today's show. I think it's because I'm not used to so many shows with such frequency that my brain kind of shuts off after we've already had one. I'm hoping to hear some hot takes because I have not looked at one shred of news today, and it's going to take me a minute to cook up a really bad opinion, if that's okay with you.
I like that. I like what he did there. He starts by saying, actually, Lee, the reason I forgot is because it's your fault. So he starts off attacking me. And then secondly, he says, it's going to take me a while to get warmed up to some bad opinions. So you got to keep the show going before I can throw out. All right, Apostate Nate, I take that bet. I'll give you a few minutes and we can hopefully hear a hot take from you. Let's jump over and hear from Chris over on stereo. We have a few messages. I have no transcript, so we'll roll the dice. They look like real messages. He left them all in the last few minutes, so hopefully they are about the death penalty. Let's hear from Chris.
Hey, I found you again. I wrote you on X. I like this. Would you or would you not kill another human, essentially, to get a fucking kidney, a liver, a heart, a set of eyeballs? Hey, we could just grow them. We could just have children in like basements with imbuing sacks of shit, and then we could grow everybody. And it'll be a beautiful day. Wouldn't it? Wouldn't it be a fucking beautiful day, eh?
My first
Lee, can I
comment
ask you a
is
question
that A
about
at
that?
the end is Chris Canadian. That made me think that maybe he was Canadian. I have another take from that voice message, but I was like, A? Ooh, he might be a Canadian. And then I have another question based on that. But yes, Apostate Nate, it seems like you have already generated your own take. What is it?
No, it's not a bad take. I think this is a good take on the last caller and maybe on voice messages in general on the show. I think you get more drunk voice messages on news debates than sober ones. That one sounded sauce to me.
So that's also my question. So Glenn, as someone who seems to be our resident expert on alcohol, Chris, as we heard, he has been part of the show before. He reached out to me over on Twitter and I said, yep, this is me. And I thought that maybe that would mean he would join us on Twitter, but nope, still over on stereo. So my first question for you, Glenn, is he Canadian? That A at the end there. And then secondly, what is he drinking too much of, do you think?
My first thought is he was drunk, and I didn't really think about him being Canadian. So maybe play his next message. I'll get back to you on the Canadian thing, and then I'll let you know what he's drinking.
Okay, let's hear another message from Chris. And everybody, if you have a guess, is he Canadian? What is he drinking too much of? I'd like to do trial by committee here. If we can address those two questions, I'll be a very happy man. Oh, okay, let's hear more hot takes from Chris over on stereo.
It's like $30,000 more a year to keep someone on death row, and they end up being on death row for I don't know 20 or 30 or 40 more years because people are that greedy. They'll take that extra 2 grand, 5, 6, 7 grand a year. They do it. They do it because they're greedy as fuck. Ruthless greed. Just fucking kill them. But no. Oh, not this year. I got a brand new car payment.
Okay, so that was a little less drunk. Let's hear one more from Chris and see if we can really get the drunk, because that first one was quite a doozy. Let's hear one more.
Funny enough, for the record, ninja is like moose. You don't actually need to say ninjas. It need not be plural. Ninja could be one or many. Just say it. Pretty sure I'm right about that.
All right, so I'm checking with ChatGPT on that. I've never specifically known the plural of ninja. Let's see what that is. The plural of ninja can either be ninja or ninjas, depending on the context and language you're using. In Japanese, nouns don't have different plural forms. Okay, so in Japanese, it doesn't matter. But in English, it does. So I guess technically you can say like 35 ninja were killed yesterday, which does sound kind of sweet without the S. But that's only because we are honoring its original Japanese form. In English, you add an S. So I think Chris is drunk because one of the hallmarks of drinking too much is coming up with weird facts like that also turn out to be not true. So let's go back to stereo, Twitter. Is Chris Canadian, and what has he drank too much of? Glenn, do you want to start us off here as the resident Canadian?
I got you. I can't confirm if he's Canadian, but he seems like a beer guy, and he probably has had two between each comment. And they progressively get kind of weirder.
We're going to hear from Justice Kelly in a moment, so stay with us, Justice Kelly. But yes, Apostate Nate, I think you have an input here on whether or not he's Canadian and what he's drank too much of.
I'm not sure about the Canadian part, although I should know because I hear Canadian accents enough watching the NHL on the regular. But if I had to guess the drink, I would say what we're dealing with here, and this mostly has to do with the sloppiness of it and the real struggle to get that last message going. I think this individual has downed voluminous amounts of Kahlua, straight up.
I can't say that either of those options seem more believable than the other, but I do like the Apostate Nate method a little bit more than Glenn. Like, oh, he's a beer drinker, Lee. All right, who isn't? But that he's just been like throwing down Kahlua. That is a pretty nice mental image, I'm going to say. Okay, Chris, go ahead and sober up. Stop leaving us messages. I'll try to get to some more, but you've already left us a lot, which also may be a really good indication that you've had a little too much Kahlua. But stay with us, Chris. We're going to keep going back to very entertaining Chris throughout the show. It is Newz Debate. I am Lee. I'm live on Twitter Spaces, Stereo, rumble.com/user/NEWZ Debate, and twitch.tv/NEWZ Debate. It's a hot take show. We've already discussed the death penalty. We teased this about $900 billion defense bill that somehow also has some gender affirming care restrictions in there. Reggie was waiting to speak, and I apologize because Reggie tweeted me earlier and said, "Hey Lee, I'll try to join the show during my break," because he's at work. And then when the show started and he immediately was okay with speaking, I didn't connect that it was his break. I thought that would be later in the show, and so now he can't speak. So he tweeted and let me know that. My apologies. Boo me. Go Reggie. I apologize. If Reggie is able to join us again on the show, the second he requests to speak, we're going to stop what we're doing and we're going to throw him up. And maybe we'll talk about that defense spending bill and come back to it if that does happen in the show. But Justice Kelly, you have requested to speak. You are now a speaker over on Twitter. What's on your mind?
Well, I'm not Canadian, but I'm feeling like I need a drink after that. I don't know. What's on the news? This week I watched that hearing on the drones, which was really interesting.
So yeah, we talked about the drones a few shows ago, a handful of days ago. I was really excited
Did anyone watch the congressional?
official. I did not, but we had the official sort of denials like we usually get with UFOs or UAP. It sounded just exactly the same thing, except with this, of course, drones are crashing. People are like effing with them and shining lights at them and stuff. So it's a real thing. Even government officials in New Jersey are saying it's a real thing. What did they say in the congressional hearing? I wasn't able to catch it.
It was, well, you know what the military, sometimes you're like, are they really in the dark, or are they just saying this because this is a public hearing? But it seems like they really were kind of at a loss. I think the scariest part of it was just hearing kind of how unconfident they were about knowing what they are or having a plan about them. And they wanted to partner with Ukraine, which I think makes sense, but it is also like, hello, like what we're supposed to have like the best military. But so that came up talking about how our country, just in general, I think we can all agree with this. Anytime you deal with an institution or any government agency, it's very bureaucratic. And so it's hard to get efficiency. So there seemed to be some dispute over whose jurisdiction these drones are in, but they're in United States airspace. So you think we could quickly resolve that?
So let me read here from northjersey.com. The only time, and hopefully the only time for sure, that I have read from northjersey.com. As reports of mysterious drone flights continue in New Jersey, local officials have expressed pure frustration about the lack of updates from the FBI and other federal agencies. In Washington, D.C. yesterday, some members of Congress were equally frustrated by an FBI official who repeatedly told them the Bureau had not yet identified an individual or group that may be responsible for the deluge of drone sightings that have gained a national spotlight. At the hearing, Tony Gonzalez, representative from Texas, asked, "You're telling me we don't know what the hell these drones in New Jersey are?"
Yeah, he did.
Then the assistant director of the Critical Incident Response Group for the FBI, Robert Wheeler Jr., replied, "That's correct." And then Gonzalez was like, "That's crazy. That's madness."
It was a shame that it was. I didn't anticipate watching it too much because I started watching it at like 1 a.m. Eastern. But it's not unusual for me to be awake that long, but it just kept going. But it became engrossing just how little information they seem to have. But yeah, it definitely doesn't instill a lot of confidence. But I will say, as a positive, the lawmakers, like the congressional members that were asking the questions, did seem genuinely concerned by the lack of answers. So hopefully from this hearing, we can seek some kind of resolution reached. But it was kind of alarming that they, after so many days, didn't know where they were coming from. I'm not even like an expert, but I would be thinking like, okay, well, what's the radius for these like that kind of thing? it just seems surprising that they didn't really have any idea. At one point they asked, do you have any indication that this is a security threat, a public safety threat? And they also couldn't answer that. They said they don't know. They would like the public, if they know anything, to call the FBI tip line, which,
Always a
you know,
bold move when you're like,
yeah.
do you know something? Do you know how to use a phone? Do you have a
Yeah.
pen to write down a number? Write this number down and please help the FBI. Yeah, it's not a strong move.
Yeah.
But this is, as we mentioned a moment ago, this is just an update. It's the same that they've been saying forever. They've been like, we don't know what this is. And mostly they're saying it's not a threat, but focusing even more on we don't know what this is. And now I've seen in other news stories, they're telling people in New Jersey not to shine lights in the sky and not to shoot the drones. They're like, hey there, I know there's a lot of guns in Jersey. Don't shoot these drones.
It was a shame at the end. The National Football League was invited to send a representative and she was not able to make it, which might sound strange, like, oh, the NFL, but the NFL, I know, is very, very vigilant when it comes to drones flying over their game space because they really protect their licensing. And so I thought, hey, like these guys could not, they
I was
couldn't,
thinking
these
maybe because they
FBI
do
military
drone shows, but you're right. It's they don't want drones to film, so they're probably really good at stopping drones.
So their insight actually would have really been interesting to hear. They did provide some written information. I don't know if that was made public, but I was kind of bummed at the end of the hearing when they said that they weren't able to come. I'm like, that would have been interesting to hear their suggestions.
I'm trying to bring up a video now from Eyewitness News 7 talking about the new urgent warning about drone sightings in Jersey. Yeah, I think we're going to be able to get this. Okay. So you can hear it over on Twitter Spaces. And if anybody is on, we got some people over here. If you're on my video streams, which are on twitch.tv/NEWZ debate and also rumble.com/user/NEWZ debate, you'll see it, but it usually works out that it's perfectly fine just to to hear it. Let me just bring this up. Make sure everything's working. Yes, I think this is going to work. So stay with me, Justice Kelly. We're just going to get an update here on the drones and the warning about said drones in Jersey. It's News Debate. I'm Lee.
Police about all those drones spotted in New Jersey. They're urging the public do not shine laser point at them after several incidents of plane and helicopter pilots getting hit with the lasers in their eyes during flights.
Right. The White House finally has broken its silence on the topic, saying that the drones seen over the Northeast are a mix, they say, of law enforcement, commercial, and hobbyist drones, saying no public or national security threat has been found.
We got ABC's Perry Russin with the latest.
The White House today working to calm concern over the reported drones hovering over the Northeast.
There's no national security threat we're seeing at this time and no threat to public safety.
ABC News cannot confirm what these videos show. National Security spokesman John Kirby on GMA this morning saying people are seeing a mix of law enforcement, commercial, and hobbyist drones in the sky.
Most of these aircraft are doing good things. They're delivering products. They're being tested for science purposes. They're conducting law enforcement missions.
Drones have been reported in at least 7 states in the Northeast. Federal sources tell ABC News they're deploying infrared cameras and drone detection technology to ensure those flying over New York and New Jersey are not a threat.
Thousands upon thousands fly in our skies legally and lawfully every single day, doing all kinds of good things for the public good. And the Northeast corridor is one of the busiest.
President-elect Trump demanding more government transparency.
I think they'd be better off saying what it is. Our military knows and our president knows. And for some reason, they want to keep people in suspense.
The FBI says it's concerned after seeing an increase of pilots being hit in the eyes with lasers after people on the ground think they see a drone. Investigators say do not aim lasers at suspected drones.
We are also concerned people will take matters into their own hands and fire a weapon at an aircraft.
Drones have also been reported near Trump's estate in Bedminster, New Jersey. John Kirby says that area is restricted airspace, and they are confident in their ability to keep that airspace safe and secure. Perry Russom, ABC News, Washington.
Did anyone else laugh out loud when they got to the part about how pilots are being hit by lasers in the eye, and therefore we should not
Yeah.
shine lasers at drones? I knew it was coming. I've seen that reporting, but I still couldn't help myself. And like, how disgusting is it that whoever that government official was, the best they can give us is basically the same thing they've been saying about UFOs for the past 50 years. The vast majority of
Right.
sightings are just normal aircraft, and we fly planes every day in this part of the country. It's like, okay, maybe there are some drones every day in New Jersey delivering a package or two, like certainly not a lot, but maybe there's a few. That's not what this is. Like, that is just
No.
ridiculous. That doesn't help anybody. It just makes you look like an idiot. It makes you look like you're lying, even if you have no information and you're just trying to have something to say. Then when Trump comes in and he says, well, the government's lying to you, you don't have to be crazy to start thinking maybe Trump's right.
Yeah. I mean, it does beg the question, especially after seeing the panel of the lawmakers getting such a smokescreen from the so-called experts. But I do believe in his transition that Trump would be getting some kind of intelligence briefings. So I would imagine he would probably be aware of anything that Biden would be aware.
Yeah, I'm
I
not
don't
sure how
know.
that works exactly. But even as a former president, you are able to have daily intelligent briefings if you exercise that right. And they keep track
Hmm.
of that. So you can like go somewhere and find out who's doing that and who's not. So even if he was not going to be president, that's something that he'd have on his possibility list. But you'd think even more so, since he's going to be there not too long, he'd be getting some of this information. The disappointing thing is that it may be they literally don't know what they are. So he might not have any
Yeah.
more
I think
information than we do.
I think it really is that, because I feel like if it was classified, it would have been a stronger response to say, thank you for your question. We understand the American public is concerned about this. Right now it's classified, but we have it under control and will make this public information available to everyone as soon as we can, or something, than just, we don't know. Call us.
Well, you
You
see,
know?
Justice Kelly, every single day, there are many drones that fly through the great state of New Jersey. Some of them are delivering packages. And then
Mhm.
also, yes, please don't shine your lasers at the drones because pilots are being distracted while they fly through the great garden state. Yeah, it just, I think it would have been better to make no comment, and
Mhm.
just stick with that at this point, because it I'm not saying this is the case, but if, a year from now we know that this was something huge and they were denying it, it would probably look like it does now. I'm not saying that's what's happening, but just imagine if a year from now we know that this was some sort of weird, I don't know, Russian thing, alien thing. I, I feel like it would look exactly like it does now. And then we would have a reveal. And that's not a good sign.
Yeah, it is concerning. And it seems like it's, signals to any of America's enemies that there are weak spots, which is obviously not good for any of us.
Yeah. I mean, we're rebooting our entire military to basically fight Chinese body armor. The army has adopted a new
Mhm.
SIG rifle, and it has a new round and all these different things to fight China. And we can't deal with drones in New Jersey. I know those are not the exact same thing. Don't get me wrong; they're not the exact same thing at all. But it just seems counterintuitive. So, okay, Justice
Well,
Kelly,
and like that,
I'm sorry,
the
go on. Yeah.
one, the Tennessee congressional member that started with this. So you're telling us you don't know what these drones are. He went on to say in his 5 minutes, and this is true, like, drones are not new technology. They have been around for many, many years, certainly in the military space. So the fact that it's 2024 and we're this confused about drones and like, well, we're gonna have to talk to Ukraine, is kind of alarming and not it doesn't seem like it just doesn't seem fair. Like we should know better than that. We should be better
Doesn't
on
seem
top of
right.
that.
Yeah. So you brought up this story. Obviously, it's something you've been paying attention to. If you had to put your vote on something, what do you think this is? And be as creative as you'd like. What do you think this will turn out to be?
I would like to think that it's a new reboot of the X-Files starting with the original cast.
I got to
It'd
say,
be
if they
like,
brought the X-Files back another time, because I think they've brought it back at least twice previously,
yeah,
and the first episode is about drones, I'm not sure I'm going to tune in. I feel like
I
the
think
writers of the
that like,
X-Files could have been a little better than that.
yeah, that's true. I just, it also to me, a thought was like, well, maybe it's just a bunch of like Gen Z kids just seeing what they could do to like cause chaos, and it's working with drones. You never know.
That's sort of my vote. I wouldn't put it past it being the doing of like Iran or something like that, or China, like insert country here. But I think this is coordinated. At this point, you're going to have copycats. So you're going to have people who just have one drone and they got it to take some GoPro footage of their house or something. But then when everyone in Jersey is freaking out because we have no information about something that's really happening, they're like, well, I'm going to start flying my drone at night with lights on too, and just kind of add to that.
Just to keep an eye on it. Yeah.
Yeah, just not only to keep an eye on it, but just, I don't know, to screw everybody over. I feel like that there's some people out there that are doing that. But the
Yeah.
original thing that I think is still going on, and the thing that sparked all of this, I believe it's coordinated. So at the very least, it could be some sort of online group that decided, like, imagine a flash mob that just shows up at like Central Station in a city, and they just do
Yeah,
some sort of dance and they film it. We're all familiar with that sort of thing. That happens. Like, people will
it does.
meet
It
up
does.
online, and they will schedule that, and they will just show up and do it. Imagine if instead of doing that and putting it on TikTok, they just all had drones. It could be something just as stupid as that. But I would say anywhere from that to some sort of foreign entity that's either operating in Jersey or is getting in touch with people who do live in Jersey and they don't know who they're talking to. Like, there are all these gig economy websites you can go on to and pay someone to do stuff, but they don't know who you are. Just as long as you pay them, you do it. There's so
Mhm.
many different things that are possible, but I do think it's coordinated. I do think it's real. And the longer it goes on, the harder it is to identify that, whatever it is, versus all the people who are just, I have a drone. If I lived in New Jersey and I had a drone, I would probably be flying it right now. just for shits
Yeah.
and giggles.
Yeah. Let me dust the cobwebs off my drone. Maybe there'll be a rise in drone sales for the holidays. Maybe it's a marketing campaign.
If you have some drones to sell, go to Jersey.
Yeah.
Like, that's actually not a very bad idea at all. Martha over on Twitter says, not to be presumptuous, but David Duchovny is a hunk, and I'm about to write Gillian Anderson. Oh, she's a good looker as well. You never
She
realize
is.
from the X-Files, but she's gone on and done other things, and I'm like, ooh, is that Scully from the X-Files? That's attractive. All right, let's reset. It's News Debate. I am Lee. We got some more people who want to speak. So let me bring people up. Frankie J, who's one of my supporters over on patreon.com/NEWZ debate, has his hand up. Big thanks to Justice Kelly. Stay with us on the show. I invite everybody to come up and speak at least once on the program. Maybe we'll have you up a second time a little bit later. But if you want to jump the line and have a more constant voice on the program, you can become a co-host by supporting me at patreon.com/NEWZ debate, like Glenn, like Frankie, like Apostate Nate, who was with us a little bit earlier in the show, and Patrice, who's here with us right now, but is not a speaker. Frankie, your hand is up. What's on your mind?
Hey, Lee. Hey, everybody. This drone thing, it's weird because I'm in northeastern New York technically, but there's been no talk about it here or no sightings here or anything. So I don't know if maybe it has to me being in the mountains that the drones aren't coming up this high. But I think that's more, I don't know why they're saying New York. Isn't it more isolated in New Jersey? I haven't really been paying
So
attention to it.
most
Like,
sightings are in Jersey, but the states around Jersey are starting to get
Yeah.
sightings now as well.
so that might just be recreationalists getting involved.
Once again,
like you said,
copycats. If I had a drone and I was in the area, I'd be flying it now.
Oh yeah. Well, if I had a drone, I'd be outside right now creating havoc. I'd have 1 million views on YouTube. It would be sweet. I would definitely do it. I gotta get a drone. I gotta get a good one though, like a 3-foot or a 4-foot one, to make it legit and get some really good LED blinking lights on that sucker. But I think Trump is right. I know that you're not a fan of Trump, and we've already discussed that. But I think he's right, actually. It's like the most honest he's ever sounded, actually, when he talks. That the government knows what it is, and they're just not telling you. And Joe Biden is not going to tell him shit when they transfer power. Trump's going to have to find out on his own. I think they're going to just pass each other in the hall as far as the transition of power is concerned. But I'm interested to find out what happens with this and to see if it is like a flash mob, because the flash mobs back 20 years ago were just idiots like agree to meet in the middle of a mall and dance to Michael Jackson Thriller on Halloween, whereas now flash mobs are getting more technological and turning into drone clubs. So
Can
it
you
might just be a
imagine if
big
you were
drone club.
part of some Discord server, or what's the really secure one that everyone uses to break the law? What's that app? It's the
I don't break the law, so I don't know.
No, but it's not one that people don't know about. Like it's a really safe, secure one. Telegram. So people use
I've heard
Telegram
Telegram.
sometimes just because they want to use it, but then also people will use it specifically because apparently it's very well insulated. So just imagine if you stumbled upon the flash mob drone Telegram channel. That would be the coolest thing ever. Like, hey everybody, starting in November or whenever this started in earnest, we're just gonna fly our drones at night and not do anything specific, not say anything, and just kind of let it ride and see what it turns into. Like, it's very possible that could be.
Well, another thing I've noticed, if you go through Reels, is that a lot of people are taking this to the extreme and making their own photoshopped versions of like these big round UFOs going down in New York City's Times Square and doing all kinds of ridiculous Photoshop videos. So you don't know which ones are real and which ones aren't. The news obviously might have more.
If you see a UFO in Times Square, I feel like we know which one's real and which one's not, Frankie. Do you see that in your
Yeah,
life?
I know.
I did not see this on the news. Wow, this is quite an update that I'm seeing on Instagram right now. Aliens landed in Midtown Manhattan.
There's some pretty damn good photo editing software, is what I'm saying. I don't know how to do any of that, but as far as the drone thing, it is definitely interesting. It's, to me, I'm not afraid. I mean, like, whatever. What's it gonna do? I mean, they're gonna shoot me, or what are they gonna do? Just hover above my home and bother me?
This is the problem: is that there's multiple levels of fear and reasonable security precautions. So let's just start with fear. If there's a mass of sightings of drones in Jersey, like there has been, people rightfully are like, what is this? Even if they can't think of a way that it's going to affect them, they have a right to say, this is not normal. Why is not more being done? So that's like first level. Second level is reactions to the first level. So people are now shining like lasers into the sky. We heard in the video a moment ago, I'm not sure if you heard that, Frankie, Government officials are literally now telling people, do not shine laser pointers in the sky because pilots are having trouble getting hit with lasers in their cockpit. Okay, so that's another level. But then you also have, I think I read 2 airports, certainly one airport was shut down for at least an hour recently because drones were invading its airspace.
Oh,
That is,
LaGuardia.
I
Yeah.
can't remember which one it was, but that's a significant problem because all it takes, like, do you remember the Miracle on the Hudson with Sully Sullenberger or whatever the hell his name was? The old guy who
Yep.
saved everyone's life. That happened
Yep.
because the plane hit 2 birds at the same time and lost its engines. I don't think a drone is the same thing as a bird, so it's not as bad, but it's not good if one of these gets sucked in to an engine, right? And maybe it's
No,
even
that
worse.
would be an
Drones
explosion.
will have metal. Birds don't have metal. They have bone. Is that a difference? Who knows? So that is a real problem. Also,
Well,
I
can
read
I
on the
ask?
show.
Let me
One
ask-
second, Frankie. I
Sorry.
read on the show previously that a Coast Guard ship was being trailed by drones. Now, that's probably funny to think about, but the Coast Guard is an actual branch of our military, and the fact that they're being like spied on by drones, like that doesn't instill confidence. So there's probably other examples we can point to. Those are just the ones I'm aware of. Those are real tangible problems that go beyond just we're kind of confused and afraid because there's a bunch of drones in the sky. So even if there is no real threats, the fact that this is happening has created real tangible threats. Emmy, keep your hand up. We're going to get to you in a. Thank you. You wanted to respond?
I just don't understand. They obviously can't fly. I mean, as far as I understand, they're not flying as high as like a commercial airplane or helicopter. Why are there not like smaller helicopters or smaller uh, aircraft up there, kind of hovering above the areas where these sightings are, trying to maybe intercept them and find out? I think it's just a big game being played by the government, really, because like I
Wait.
said
So
the other night,
you think the government is flying the drones?
I just think there's a conspiracy behind it. Yes,
So
I
what
think
would
they know
be
exactly.
can you think of a specific benefit for the government? Because we don't know at this point. Okay, everything's game. Let's just talk and share our thoughts.
Yeah,
But my question always with conspiracies is what's the benefit? And some big conspiracies have a very clear benefit behind them. What would be the benefit of the government actually flying drones and not telling us that? And then perhaps also lying to its own branches of the military. So you could imagine some people hypothetically in this situation, they know that the government's doing this, right? But then the other
yeah.
government officials that are trying to track it, maybe they have not been told, so they literally don't know. So then you have some people who do know, some people who don't know. What's the benefit of that, Frankie?
Control. They got everybody feeling all sorts of ways right now, scared, curious, angry, all kinds of things, and that's a form of control. I mean, we can go back to
So
2020 when COVID.
you've just kicked the can down the road. So if there was something happening right now that they were trying to make people not
Yeah.
think about that you could connect it to, that would be a reason. But right now you're just saying control, but you could say that for anything. That's not specifically a benefit.
No, maybe not, but the government controls a big thing. But I'll mute and not dig any deeper.
But Frankie, if you had to venture a guess, is your guess that you think it's the government? My guess is that it is a group that is somehow coordinated. I don't know what that group is. Once again, it could just be people on Telegram, or it could be literally a foreign entity screwing with us. But I think it's a coordinated, real thing that's happening. What would be your guess?
Well, considering the election just ended and there's a lot of unhappy people that Kamala didn't get elected, and it happens to be over New Jersey, where Trump's residence is. I know his airspace is apparently safe.
Well, Trump
above
has a
his
lot of
residence, but
residencies, probably.
well, what I'm saying is, could it be in response to that? A lot of people are, acting crazy ever since the election, doing weird off the wall things. Could it be something in line with the election and the results not going the way certain people wanted them to go? What if they got together as a group and they're like, you know what? Let's do this. Let's create an uproar and try to get everybody crazy. I mean, there's so many different possibilities. I wouldn't really know where to start. I'm glad I'm not part of that committee. I'm glad that, I'm retired enough that I don't have to sit at that table and beat my head like the movie Armageddon. So, I guess we'll
Get
find
Bruce
out.
Willis in here. He'll figure it out.
Yeah, he'll find out.
I could
There's
just
a hole,
imagine,
he'll drill it.
it's like, Ms. Harris, we see that you're very distraught that you lost the election, but we have a surprise for you. We have prepared a way for you to get back. It involves a bunch of drones over New Jersey. Tell me more. End scene. Like that just, I know it's hard to believe, Frankie. It is an interesting hypothetical. I just, once again, where's the benefit? Because if you talk about like who killed JFK, did we really land on the moon? You can really come up with several tangible benefits of those conspiracy theories. I have yet to even approach one for New Jersey, because I think this is just a story that people are talking about. I don't think people are actually freaking out. I don't think that it's really causing too many problems other than the one or two airports that had to close down. The fact that drones are like chasing a Coast Guard boat, and now people are shining lasers. These are all small concerns in the end that could turn into bigger concerns. It's more of a nuisance story than anything else, but it's a nuisance story that's fascinating. So as soon as we have a benefit, Frankie, I will be very open to talking conspiracies. It's hard for me to come up with that. It's News Debate. I'm Lee. Emmy, you've been waiting very patiently with your hand up. Go ahead and unmute yourself. What's your hot take? Thanks for calling into the show.
Hi, guys. First of all, happy holidays. My talk is about the extradition hearing tomorrow of Luigi Mangione, who is the CEO killer in Manhattan of Brian Thompson of the UHC. It will be very interesting because he's going to be he will likely waive extradition and be extradited from Altoona, Pennsylvania to New York tomorrow.
Yeah, that is a great topic. Thanks for bringing that up. Let me pull up something from ABC News to get some facts, and I want to continue hearing your thoughts about it.
He has two hearings tomorrow. One is for the Altoona charges, I think, and the other one, they're back-to-back, is for the extradition. But according to news sources yesterday, they're saying he's expected to waive his extradition. And yesterday, he was indicted on first-degree murder charge in for the death of Brian Thompson, the CEO of UHC.
I think generally you're right. Let's just catch up with ABC News, and then I want to hear more of your thoughts. So Luigi Mangione,
Sure.
I will add here the folk hero that is Luigi Mangione, because for a lot of people, he sort of has brought attention to a horrible issue in the United States of healthcare companies existing just to make money rather than to give healthcare to Americans. So Luigi Mangione, the man accused of gunning down United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson, will waive extradition to New York, as you mentioned, when he appears in court in Pennsylvania on Thursday. So he was arrested at a McDonald's in Pennsylvania. He has stayed there, and he is saying that, okay, bring me to New York. The Pennsylvania judge must accept the waiver or go forward with a scheduled hearing Thursday morning immediately following a separate hearing on the local charges. So he also faces charges because he was caught with a gun and maybe something else, but certainly because he was caught with a gun. Oh, he was caught with fake IDs. That might be part of it. Assuming the extradition paperwork is in order, the NYPD would transport Mangione from Pennsylvania to New York. He could be arraigned in New York as soon as tomorrow. The 26-year-old is accused. One second, is accused of gunning down. Once again, he clearly did. It seems to be him. The United Healthcare CEO back on December 4th in the morning. A Manhattan grand jury has upgraded charges against Mangione to include first-degree murder in furtherance of terrorism. So they're calling him a terrorist now. Because the attack was intended to invoke terror, according to the Manhattan District Attorney. He faces charges including allegedly possessing an untraceable ghost gun in Pennsylvania. Yes, that was when they caught him at the McDonald's. And he's also charged in New York with 2 counts of second-degree murder, 2 counts of criminal possession of a weapon, and then a bunch of other things as well. And so that's just sort of the update on the facts. But really quickly, and then we'll check back in with Emmy. Something that I was following earlier in the show that I kind of teased when we first started today's news debate program was that I'm seeing more and more stories talking about how a lot of Americans have sympathy for Luigi Mangione. And they're thinking that it might be difficult for prosecutors to convict him because juries will have sympathy for him as well. It might be impossible. You're supposed to have an objective jury that's not predisposed to having certain feelings. But when American health insurance is horrible, that might be impossible. So let me jump over now to CNN. Dude, that was the title. I'm trying to find something if there's anything. Yes, some legal experts believe terrorism is an overreach. Yeah, some legal experts contend that prosecutors in New York have overreached by charging him with terrorism. And it might be hard for them to prove that in courts. And Mangione apparently has a very good defense lawyer now. So, okay, that was the small update. So back to you, Emmy. What do you think about all this?
I think he will be easily convicted. And I don't think it's overcharged terrorism. He was also planning maybe some others to be, because he had a manifesto and a few others were possibly on that list. And also, I think those who support him, that's not good. I will never support somebody like that. And his attorney is the wife of the attorney representing PDD. So if you want to connect these two.
Sorry, say that again. You said his attorney is the wife of who?
Of the attorney representing P. Diddy in New York.
Oh, yes,
She
P.
was
Diddy.
a
Yes, I did
former
see that. Yeah, there's a P. Diddy
She
connection.
was she was a former district attorney, and now she's helping with. She's under Bragg, I believe.
So I like these hot takes here. I mean, I don't think you're going to be proven too wrong. It is dangerous to start being like, well, it's okay to murder the people we don't like. So you're not wrong about that. You can't just forget the murder because that's what law is for. It's supposed to hold back chaos. At the same time, our justice system is based on a get out of jail free card every once in a while. We were talking about the movie A Time to Kill, which is a really old, I think it came from the 90s or something. I streamed it, but I think it actually came out back in the day with like VHS. It's that old. And the basic idea is Samuel Jackson plays a guy whose daughter is really, really hurt by some people, and he just kills them. And okay, it's been a long time. I'll give away the ending. He's either found guilty but not sentenced to prison, or he's found innocent, whatever the ruling is, because he was dealing with so much grief that he murdered the people who really, really attacked his young daughter. So this is a Hollywood film, but the idea that those sort of trials can take place is completely legit and real. So I'm not saying that Luigi Mangione should be set free. the idea that he won't be convicted of first degree murder, I think is a plausible one. But Emmy, what you said, and I liked your conviction, he also easily could be convicted of first degree murder and terrorism. I could see a lot of range in the result here. I also could see that he doesn't make it to trial. I could imagine that he will be murdered in prison.
I doubt he will be. I've heard that he's going to be transferred to Rikers prison. My thing is this, though. Honestly, I've heard that if he's connected to the two second-degree charges, they're the same. They have, especially the second one with the terrorism one, it has the same amount of sentence as first-degree murder. What do I mean? The first-degree murder has life without parole as a maximum sentence. The second-degree murder, one of them is 25 years to life, and the other one with the act of terrorism, the second one is life without parole. I think he's going to get that. I don't think he will be killed in the prison. We'll see, but I hope there's a trial and I hope he's convicted.
And so that's the other part that was really interesting is we can talk about what's going to happen, but you specifically are like, I don't think he's going to be killed in prison, and I hope he gets convicted and stays in prison the rest of his life. I really, really, really enjoy this is how I feel, Lee. I wouldn't be surprised if he is killed in prison. So he's taken out, and we've talked about this before on the show. I'm not saying that prisoners would kill him like you would like a pedophile or a snitch, that people in power who control what happens in prison would get someone to kill him, or he'll be Jeffrey Epstein. And what I mean by that is he'll be in solitary confinement, and all of a sudden they'll go check on him, and he will have hung himself with his bed sheet, or he will have hung himself with his underwear, and they'll be like, oh yes, sorry, we weren't paying attention, there's no video. I really think that that's absolutely possible. But to go to your this is how I feel, and I really respect that. I kind of hope he's not convicted of first degree murder. He's not convicted of some sort of terrorism charge. I think clearly he's someone who's very angry and very disturbed. And I'm not a lawyer, but I feel like it's not outrageous. And especially someone who's had severe back problems like he's had, and apparently he's also had family member or two who had medical issues. I think you can make the case for extenuating circumstances, and a young man, is he 26? A young man who was the valedictorian of his high school. He went, I think, to an Ivy League school. Like, he had a lot of stuff going for him, and he just could not get away from his anger and his pain. And I think that points to some legitimate evidence for a reduced charge, a reduced sentence. I'm not saying let him go free, but I hope he's not convicted of first degree murder, and I hope he's not convicted of terrorism.
I honestly think, I hope he's. Look, they have said that supposedly he was using UHC. No. There have been sources that say that he's not.
He apparently was not a customer of United Healthcare.
Exactly. And also, I don't know if you saw yesterday the press conference of when they had the ignition. I don't know how you say it. Indicted. They also said his mother reported him missing in November this year in SF. She saw a picture of him with like a similar picture, and she said it could be him. He could be possible to do these kind of things. That was said yesterday in the press conference. And
it looked like when he was caught that maybe the mistake he made was taking down his mask when he was apparently flirting. No, I'm setting the stage here. Taking down his mask when he was flirting with the hostel worker. But you're right. The more information that we're getting, it's that he was identified in San Francisco somehow before he was caught. And then also the police had spoken to his mother before he was caught. So it appears that even if he had not lowered his mask, well, no, maybe his mom recognized the mask picture, whatever the case, before he was caught by some random person in a McDonald's who just recognized him. The police in San Francisco area were apparently talking to his mom. Yeah, you're not wrong. That has come out.
But actually, she reported him missing there in November 18th. I watched very carefully the press conference. It will be interesting what will happen. But I think, and also one thing I noticed, they're saying that his grandmother had a will of some $1 million, and now that he committed a crime, technically he's not convicted yet because obviously everything he's proven innocent until guilty. But if convicted, he won't get any money of the based on the will.
Yeah, that could be. Certainly the Menendez brothers who murdered their parents before they were convicted of that, they did inherit their parents' money. And one of the reasons they didn't look very good was that they claimed it was self-defense because they were being abused. But then they spent their parents' money and like seemed to have a pretty good time after they murdered them. And then when they were convicted, if I understand correctly, all of that disappeared. I don't know where that money went, but it didn't go to them. So that makes sense because you don't want to incentivize people to murder family members to get inheritance. Now, someone who is just in jail and then probably, I assume he's going to be convicted of a high-level crime related to murdering someone on the street in New York. The fact that you couldn't receive that, it makes sense. But since it's not related to his crime, it has nothing to do with his grandmother, his crime. I'm not sure how that works. I would have to look that up. But you assume someone who's in jail doesn't have a lot of money. But then you look at someone like, okay, Michael Vick. He was an NFL quarterback a long time ago who was doing dog fighting and lied about it. And then they found out he was actually doing it and he was convicted. He was sent to prison. When he came out, he still had money. So I would assume they like freeze your assets when you're in prison, or maybe you have to hand them over to someone to do that while you're in prison. But I would assume they wouldn't just take them if it's unrelated to your crime. So that's a really interesting question. I'll have to look that up. Maybe I can ask ChatGPT. How does it work when you inherit money that's unrelated to your crime? Because as a 26-year-old, clearly he would probably want that money.
Sir, he had so that was from his grandmother. So it says in the rules that he can't. She said it in the rules that you cannot inherit that money. In the will, in her will.
Oh, so he won't get it anyways. It has nothing to do with prison then.
Yeah, because he committed the crime, he won't get any money.
You mean I'll have to look this up. You mean his grandmother was such a time traveler to the future that she said, if my grandson Luigi commits a crime, he won't get any money. Like that's in her will?
Exactly. Yes. And it was for it's on People magazine, and it says like to Mangioni's grandmother's will. Fox News reported last Friday, noting that Mary Mangioni left roughly $30 million to her living children and grandchildren after she died in 2023. The author reported that Mangioni's grandmother had 10 children and 37 grandchildren.
This is crazy. I'm seeing it now. It only goes to family members who don't commit a felony. That's really specific. That's crazy.
She didn't know, but some things happen, for a reason. So
wow,
happy,
that grandmother
happy
knew her
you
family.
Guys. I have to go.
She really knew her family. Yeah, Emmy, great to have you. It was really fun speaking with you. That is fantastic. If I had $1 million or more to leave to family members, I'm not sure I would write that you couldn't have it if you were a felon. If you were a felon, you've been waiting patient up. What's on your mind?
Emmy. So when the mother reported him in San Francisco in November, he had already spent, I'm going to say, quite a long time in Hawaii. And he was part of I'm going to say, homeless cult in Ala Moana on Oahu in Honolulu. So when I read that made a lot of things started making sense. So that picture of him hiking when he was shirtless, he's up in New Wanu Pass, which is a road.
Do you know
It's
that
like
location? Like, can you recognize that
I
photo?
do all the
Wow.
time. All the time. I've been there many times. It's beautiful. And it's New Wanu Lookout is famous. If somebody tells you to go there, go. It's like a jungle when you get in there. And so that's where he was there. Now the leader of this group that he was, I'll say group, it read more like a cult because there is a leader. He said at that time, the reason he liked him was because he considered him very intelligent, well educated, and what he would do is take books and books that he enjoyed, a lot of intellectual readings, and interpret them in his own way or how he saw it. So, but then the leader made a comment that he kind of just went off into a whole different mental world that even he was concerned about. One of the other people that knew him there, they really liked him. He was very well liked. But then he kind of just drifted off into into his own thing by himself. And he traveled all around Ala Moana. And Ala Moana, when it was hit by, when the crack cocaine and the meth arrived on the ships, and then, of course, well before COVID, but worse after COVID, Ala Moana, it runs the length of the coast from Diamond Head north. You can go all the way pretty far up north along the coast, like Diamond Head, Waikiki, Honolulu, and more north. All of Ala Moana it's a huge park along the coast, very well known, but it's nothing like it used to be. You don't really want to hang out there.
Okay, so when I see that attractive assassin in the photo, I'm not going to recreate that. Really quickly, I'm over on people.com and I'm showing this on twitch.tv/NEWZ debate and rumble.com/user/NEWZ debate. It's exactly what Emmy was saying. I'd never heard of this. Accused murderer Luigi Mangioni's grandmother reportedly left tens of millions of dollars to her children and grandchildren after she died, but only with one condition: any grandchild receiving inheritance money may not be charged, indicted, convicted of, or plead guilty to a felony. So the way I read that is that he's already lost the money because he's been charged with the felony. That seems to be unfair, Grandma, to be honest. Innocent until proven guilty. Have you heard of it? But my guess is he's already out of that money. The woman left roughly 30 million after she died in 2023. She had 10 children, holy cow, and 37 grandchildren. Okay, so he wasn't going to get a huge sum, to be honest. Hundreds of thousands of dollars at the most, but that is nutso. So he's certainly, I think, already lost that. I could be wrong. I feel like he's already lost it. Okay, it's News Debate. I'm Lee. Glenn and Patrice, raise your hand if you want to speak. We also have requests from Professor D and Justice Kelly to speak again. So, okay, let's do that. Let's hear from Professor D first, because we haven't heard from Professor D in a while. And then if she's still with us, because it shows on one screen she's here and on another she's not here. So if she comes back, we'll hear from Justice Kelly. But Professor D, you have requested to speak again. When we have enough of an opportunity, I bring people up for a second go around. But once again, if you want to be a co-host and make sure you're always able to speak, support the show over on patreon.com/NEWZ debate. Before we hear from Professor D, let's hear from Martha over on Twitter. She writes, the sensationalism surrounding Luigi Mangione is distasteful and hypocritical. I fully agree that the healthcare system is problematic, if not downright immoral. However, those championing his violence will, in the same breath, scream about how we need to stop gun violence. Yeah, I guess that's me. I was literally yesterday talking about how we need to stop gun violence, and I hope he doesn't get convicted of first-degree murder or terrorism. I'm not saying he should go free, but if somehow he went free, I'm not so sure how upset I would be about that. I'm just being completely honest. So, okay, call a spade a spade. And then Martha continues, the media loves beautiful people. An unappealing person would not be obtaining the same coverage and positive press like Luigi Mangione. He would be depicted as a monster. I'm not sure he'd be depicted as a monster. I would have to disagree with you there. But the fact that he had that, to be honest, the pictures of him I'm seeing now, I don't think he's that attractive. But that first photo of him pulling down his mask at the hostel, he had some really good bone structure. Let's be honest. He really did. So the sensationalism, I think, has been increased. But I would not believe that people wouldn't. I don't believe that if he was ugly, people would not also be on his side. So I'll have to disagree with you there. But you're not wrong generally about the media. All right. So Professor D, I think I've invited you to speak. Yeah. Do you want to unmute yourself and throw in what's on your mind?
Well, so look, I know you said earlier that I'm into like serial killers and true crime, which is true, and I don't plan to derail the conversation by going in there.
You hear that, Glenn? You're right. Glenn predicted it.
But no. So my thing is, about 2 years ago, do you remember the show Dahmer had came out and there was this controversy around it? Like people were saying that we should not be glamorizing crimes. We should not be doing this. I mean, eBay went as far as to say like they would not sell Jeffrey Dahmer costumes. Never mind the fact that you can just dye your hair blonde and get a polo and get some glasses. I feel bad for any white guy who looks like a serial killer. But it went as far as to like, I remember I hosted a true crime space and people would go in there saying, how dare you talk about true crime? And there were other podcasts too, and other, true crime people who are into crime would get that same reaction. But fast forward 2 years later, a good looking guy can shoot somebody and all of a sudden these same people who were criticizing those who are glamorizing true crime, well, now they're doing it, and it goes unchecked. Now, to be fair, there seems to be a lot of political saturation around this, and I can fully understand, especially as someone whose father is suffering from cancer, I can understand not liking the medical system, but it's just odd how the cultural ethos 2 years ago was just trending about how we shouldn't be doing this. And now it's like, we're going to forget that discourse ever happened.
Well, first off, sorry to hear about your father. Best of luck with all of that.
Oh, yeah, it's fine.
Person. He didn't do this for a cult of personality reason. He didn't do this because
that we know
of. I don't think that's the. I think that's not the indication at this point. But you're right. I guess we don't. But he's not like Dexter, where like he has an itch to kill. You know, he's not a psychopath. He apparently, from everything we know, he has a back problem. He's from a very rich family. He's very well educated. He could have just made money and banged a bunch of chicks like most rich dudes, and instead he murdered the CEO of a company that makes its money by denying people health care. So
I totally get, by the way, I totally get that, and I do have to say it's fair that I'm conflating two different issues, because I don't think we can compare Jeffrey Dahmer to, actually, we can't compare him to 99.9% of the planet. So I wouldn't even say that he's like Dahmer. But I remember when this came out that he assassinated someone and people were cheering it on. I was like, well, y'all, wait, because, you know, Andrew Cunanan was somebody who killed somebody, but then it came out he killed 6 other people. And so I'm just saying, like, I don't believe he killed other people, but at the same time, we don't know. So that's just the way I'm looking at it.
At the very least, I would say until we do know, it doesn't matter. So it just doesn't matter at this point.
Fair. That's fair.
You know, to go back to what you were saying about Jeffrey Dahmer, I think I remember hearing a little bit about the fact that we were, you know, having a good time watching a reenactment series and people really getting into it, which is generally sort of just crime in general. I think I remember seeing a little bit about that, but I don't believe your average person really cared or even knew that that was a thing.
Well, the only reason I brought it up is because you brought the Menendez brothers, and they had their own little show, and it was by the same creators. But sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Oh, okay. So the creator that did the Menendez series also did the Dahmer series. Like, that's what he does.
Yes. He also did American Horror Story, Glee, funnily enough, which I never got into. Awesome. Glee. I just think it's weird how you can go from Glee to Dahmer. Like, okay.
Well, it is, and then it isn't. So the subject matter is different, but if you think about what it takes to put together a show, it's probably relationships, right? And it's meeting deadlines, and it's having good conversations with investors and the studio and stuff like that. So certainly some creators make certain types of content, and some musicians make certain types of music. But what are we seeing now? Like, Beyonce does country, and like, who's the white guy who has face tattoos, so I think also is doing country now? Like, if you're a musician, you just kind of are a musician. And if you're a creator of a series, maybe, you know, you have something that you gravitate to, or you just somehow got known for doing it, so you got more projects. But I don't know, it's just a small point. But to go back once again to your comparison, I would say, just without knowing much about the canceled Jeffrey Dahmer TV show situation, I think a lot of people just like to complain, especially on the left. So they do those sorts of things. I run into it all the time about different topics, and it's not like I'm like, oh, look at this person, they were also complaining about this. I don't go into that level of micro detail, but it's just something that happens all the time. So just like the same people who talk about, well, we have to have guns even though people die, are probably the same people who talk about how, well, even abortion at 5 weeks is murder, right? Like, it just kind of fits a certain profile, and they always just kind of complain a certain way, and the left has one and the right has one. So you're not wrong to bring that up, and you're not wrong to have that comparison, but certainly at the very least, the amount of people who are engaged with the canceled Jeffrey Dahmer discussion as of late is much less than the people who are talking about and engaged, discussing, learning about all the new developments regarding the United Healthcare CEO assassination and the guy who did it, Luigi Mangione. This is something that has become a cultural zeitgeist. It is something that will define this moment in America. As I mentioned when I saw they had captured him, is that I made a joke. He rode an e-bike to go through Central Park and get away. I said, well, they caught him. The e-bike ride has ended. And then I thought for a second, I said, no, actually, I think it might also just be starting again in its own way. And that is, it's going to be a couple of years before they have a trial. I truly believe one day we could read that he killed himself in prison, and we have to figure out what that means. So it's just starting. It's the story that keeps on giving. So we're going to be talking about this over and over and over again. Professor, before we jump over and hear from Glenn, because his hand is up, do you have thoughts about sentencing? So we were hearing from Emmy not so long ago that she thinks he's going to be convicted of the highest crime. He's going to be in jail the rest of his life, and she wants him to have those convictions. I am much more interested in him getting convicted of something lower that maybe will not have such big consequences.
I absolutely believe he should be arrested. I think he should go to jail, because if I did it, I'd be sent to jail too. I mean, I'm just saying it. I mean, even though he killed someone that we could, I mean, I do believe that if we're going to send the message that we should not kill people and that we should not sensationalize and that we need to hold him to this same standard. But I just want to preface saying that you did make a fair point, saying that we can't compare, well, the worst person ever, Dahmer, to Luigi. I do want to say that, and I'm not going to bring up serial killers much anymore, because that can be a hot take in itself.
Oh, no,
like, should
Glenn, the e-bike ride has ended. We're not going to hear about all his favorite serial killers anymore.
But no, we're not. I'm not going to bring them up anymore. I just thought it was interesting how we can go from don't do that, don't talk about true crime, and then all of a sudden it's like it's fine. But again, I do acknowledge that this is rooted in different issues that people hold close to their hearts, like healthcare, and so I do. By the way, if you want to talk with I don't know if she's in the chat anymore, but Kelly is definitely someone who's of the litigation stuff. I more talk about like the actual crimes, but she's really into the litigation. Like, she's really into
do you know Justice
reading
Kelly? Is that a friend of yours?
Yeah, well, I know her. Yeah, she has done podcasts. She reads a lot of lawsuits. She'll like message me and be like, "Oh my God," and send me all this court stuff, and I'm like, "Whoa. Not throwing shade, Kelly. I
Well,
love
if
you, but
if you run into her at all while we're still going, tell her to come on back. I was about ready to throw her up after we were done speaking with you for a second hot take. But of course, is often the case on the show with my bad luck. The second I do it, they end up leaving. So she's always welcome, just like you are, Professor D. And I hope to have her and you both on the show in the future.
I'll message her and see if she can come back. But until then, I'm going to let someone else speak. So thank you.
You bet. Let's jump over and hear from Glenn. Glenn, who on his predictions of true crime lovers. By the way, if you like true crime, just wait for the Louis Mangione story. Holy cow. Really think that James Franco could play him. James Franco's a little old, but I think that they could make it work. James Franco looks just like this guy. I'm not sure who the other characters would be. I guess you'd have to have someone play the CEO. And maybe you'd have to lead up. So the movie or the series might not start with the killing, but maybe the first episode or the first 30 minutes or whatever, 20 minutes is him doing things for United Healthcare. But James Franco, there it is. Glenn, back to you.
So I guess I have a hot take on this Luigi guy. So like I can't take him seriously because his name's Luigi, because I just think he's like one of the Mario brothers, just like a fat plumber. It's what comes to mind. I just can't take him seriously. It's like, really, Luigi? Come on, man.
Glenn, you just wait.
So,
When the trial happens, if he's not been murdered in prison, there are going to be people dressed like Luigi outside the courtroom.
that would be cool. That would be cool.
With like a giant mushroom and plumbing equipment. You'll see it. It's gonna happen.
I'm not sure it needed a bunch of people cosplaying Luigi with a bunch of real pipe wrenches. I'm not sure that's a good thing, depending on where their stance is on his guiltiness.
Actually, it's too late this time, but imagine next Halloween. Could you imagine someone dressed up like Luigi, but instead of pipe wrenches, they're carrying a silenced pistol? There it is. Halloween 2025, everybody.
That's American.
Not necessarily a tasteful costume, but I guarantee someone's going to do it, and we'll see it on Reddit. Oh, yeah.
Oh, and I have one more for you. So, like, the German metal band Rammstein, the lead singer, allegedly is being sued for sexual assault. And then, like, one of his songs came on from back in the day, and he's referring to a woman. You have your parts, I have my parts. What's the problem? Let's do it quick. And I'm like, that song really didn't age well, because I think the problem was that they said no. That was the problem. One for you to make it not so explicit.
Well, so I've heard, did someone else on the show at some point, they mentioned that he was accused of sexual misconduct or something like that. I'm not sure, because we have talked on the show previously about how rap lyrics were trying to be used in court against someone who was accused of murder or something like that. And if I remember correctly, the lyrics like were about murder, so like it wasn't the craziest thing that I'd ever heard of. And just in general, a lot of
there actually was a rapper that rapped what he did for a crime, and it actually led to the actual murder because it was like a spot on, accurate description of what he did to kill the guy. And so yeah, that there's that guy, but he didn't have like a record deal or anything. He was like this guy on YouTube.
Okay, so that's different. This was like someone who was a little bit more substantial, but whatever the case, I was open to it because it's evidence, right? Like it's something that you can use. It shouldn't be maybe the only thing that convicts you of murder. But then MC Funk, who is really into hip hop, he was talking about how a lot of people are artists and they have a persona, and that's different from who they are as a person. And I could appreciate help. But I just bring that up because, maybe I'm bigoted, but rap lyrics kind of have a certain feel, a certain anger. They often talk about violent acts, and they talk about things with the police. There's stereotypes that are true about a lot of rap lyrics, especially for certain artists. So for Rammstein, I'm not so familiar with this band, but I have heard their music. If they have some lyrics like you mentioned that sort of pseudo indicate unconsensual sex, okay, maybe that could come up in a trial or a lawsuit. But the way you've described it, it sounds more like provocative
Slapstick.
Lyrics than something that someone is writing about what they do. And
Oh,
I'm not an expert.
yeah. Oh, I wasn't trying to suggest anything. I just thought it was like a funny quip to like quote those lyrics considering what he's going on. And it's like maybe the problem was that they said no. I don't know. It's just my thoughts on it. I'm not saying it's definitely allegedly. I'm not saying he's guilty or anything, or if those lyrics actually
No,
mean
you
anything.
didn't say anything out of line. My point is that it's not a slam dunk. The case we were talking about previously, maybe like a year or more ago with MC Funk, if I remember correctly, the lyrics were much more provocative and they seemed to indicate things that the DA was trying to convict them of. This doesn't
Yeah.
sound like that specifically, but it still opens a general hot take. It still opens a general question. Should artists or actors or writers be allowed to have creative freedom without worrying about if they're ever accused of a crime, people are going to look into it? Um, you could imagine someone who writes a lot of horror, like Stephen King. If he's ever charged with murdering someone, is the world going to be like, well, of course Stephen King's a murderer, read his books? Um, that seems like not worthy of being used in court because he's just made a lot of money and his entire life has been focused on writing, oftentimes very scary and interesting novels. But I wouldn't say it's not evidence. If Stephen King is accused of murder, evidence 1A, Your Honor, he's Stephen King. Like, yeah, sure. Just like if someone is a stereotypical rapper who raps about feuds and violence and East and West Coast, things, and then is involved in something like that, okay, they're a rapper. I guess what I'm getting to is how much do we value these sort of non-researched evidence. You don't have to do a lot of research to find a rapper's music. You don't have to do a lot of research to read about all the crazy things that Stephen King has put in his books. How valuable is that to a courtroom? How valuable is that to a lawsuit? I guess that's the real question for me. I think it should be included. So to go back to you, Glenn, do you think it should be allowed that if Rammstein's lead singer is being sued or up for sexual assault charges, whatever it might be, that they can say, well, look at this song. Should that be a piece of the evidence, or should they have a rule that says that's not admissible in court because this is an artist and they're allowed to create without fear of it being used against them?
Not his music in particular, no, because his music is kind of slapstickish with his lyrics. I mean, he has another song that he doesn't need his women to be smart. He doesn't need them to be beautiful, tall. He just needs them to have big tits. So I mean, like, I'm not gonna put a lot of emphasis on
So
his
he's
lyrics.
also honest, is what you're telling me, Glenn? He's also an honest human being? Is that what you said?
No, because that would indicate that his lyrics suggest something about him. I can't say that.
Well, I mean,
I got.
I'm for
I'll be
it.
right back.
Yeah, okay, yeah. Come on back, Glenn. All right, it's News Debate. I'm Lee. We have some more people requesting to speak. Oh, I'm sorry, Apostate Nate. Sometimes you invite someone to be a speaker, and for the entire show, if they come and they go, they can just automatically be a speaker. But today, for some reason, it makes me do it every time. And so my apologies, Apostate Nate. All right, we've gone 2 hours, and yesterday we did like 5 hours. That shows up on twitch.tv/NEWZ debate and rumble.com/user/NEWZ debate. Perhaps because yesterday's show was so long, I have no specific desire to do another 5-hour show. But if we have hot takes and we have people who are participating in the show, we can keep going. Otherwise, we could start wrapping things up. Was there a story that I specifically wanted to talk about that we have not yet discussed? Talked about Mangione. We talked about The drones. We haven't talked about gender affirming care restriction yet. Okay, why don't I maybe pop that one up and we can maybe make that a final topic? Because I would love to do that. We talked about the death penalty. Yeah, I mean, there's a few other things, but I think the meatiest one, the one that will generate the best discussion, will be this defense bill that also has gender affirming care restrictions. Professor D tweets over on Twitter, I believe in separating art from the artist. I am a very staunch person on this belief. Well, thank you for your opinion. I disagree, but that's what I was looking for. I wanted someone to tell me either I was right or tell me I was wrong, because I can really see it from both sides. I think that even personas that we create as artists are always a reflection of ourselves, maybe less of a reflection or more of a reflection, but they're not completely devoid of who we are. But I also see the value of being an artist and not having to be tied down by the art that you create, especially for some people. You know, if you write like the Dexter books, if you know the Showtime series Dexter, it's based on books. I've never read the books, but I figured that out because I watched Dexter and I'm like, this is great. How did they come up with this? Okay, it was a book. So when I realized someone was writing these books, I was like, oh, this guy must be crazy to come up with this serial killer who kills people who deserve to die sort of idea. And that was just my own prejudice. That was what my mind immediately went to. And I assume that's not the case, but that's, I think, a human reaction. So is it right for I think it was a guy, is it right for that guy to have to sort of have a badge of shame that even though he's a successful author, he writes about a serial killer? Maybe you're a successful author and you write about a child rapist. I don't know how those, books could be successful, but okay, it's 2024. Are people going to judge you? There are TV shows that deal with a lot of trauma for people of all ages and backgrounds and stuff. Like, I don't want people to be afraid to write that. But at the same time, I don't know, if you write a bunch of books about serial killers and then all of a sudden you're accused of being a serial killer, shouldn't that be part of the trial? I feel like that's a worthy piece of evidence. Apostate Nate, you're back with us. Your hand is up. What's that about?
Well, let me give you a brief tour to comment on that, about some of the themes that I've written about. I am a fiction writer, principally a horror and sort of hard-boiled crime writer. In the past, I've written some poetry. I used to write I once wrote like a small series of really experimental fairy tale poems where basically the fairy tale lands aren't so great anymore. Like, for example, I wrote a poem called Sleeping Beauty at the ICU, and the plot of the poem is that she dies of an STD and her corpse is turned into Frankenstein's bride, which is what Frankenstein's monster promised in the book. I've written stories about.
I just can't wait until story makes its Broadway debut. Apostate Nate, I'll be the first one there.
Right. What else have I written about that's kind of weird? In that same book of poems, there's one scene where the great Renaissance painter and inventor Leonardo da Vinci is caught in a dumpster having sex with a farm animal. There's a particular reason for that, but it would take me entirely too long. I've written stories, conventional like murders, where like a angry wife. I wrote a story about a mobster and his very, very, very late teenage boy, and he takes him out on his first assassination, a first kill, so to speak. Horror stories where children, harm comes to children, not quite in a graphic way in my stories, but certainly some very dark themes going on here. And if I were ever in trouble for something, I mean, I guess I wouldn't care if someone used it as evidence because I just don't think it's like the best evidence. It would have to be, the story would have to be so uncanny and specific to the crime for I think that to really matter in the brains of thinking jurors. And of course, here I am presuming thinking jurors. So I guess my answer to that is I guess I wouldn't really care because I don't think hopefully that's what would get me convicted. And if that's what it is, maybe I need to check out of this society anyway and just sit in a cell. Maybe that's better.
So yeah, that's by the way, this is all fascinating. If you ever want to talk more about this, I'd be game. But thanks for sharing that. And I sort of agree with you. You know, I think it should be allowed to be evidence that someone creates, but then what other evidence is there? It's certainly not like finding a gun with your fingerprints on it. It's not like finding some sort of payments to someone who then murdered someone for you. It's context. It's table dressing. It is something that can set the stage for more of an argument. But then if it gets to, it's a very circumstantial case, but it unfolded the way like one of your stories, worked, one of Stephen King's books. I think the defense could argue in a situation like that like why would this person follow their own story? Like, wouldn't they know that would be pretty problematic in the end when they have done it a little bit differently? So clearly someone was trying to frame my client, that sort of situation. I just think it should be admissible. I think it's something that should be part of evidence. But once again, it doesn't mean that it's a slam dunk for the DA. I think there is a way to counter that. Even if it is just, this is someone who is creative and put their time and energy into creating content, and they should not be held inappropriately responsible for just their content. Like, let's convict them of a crime when there's evidence, that sort of a thing. But to not include it and to have a rule that says you can't include it, that seems counterintuitive. That seems like special treatment, which I don't agree with. Never agree with special treatment almost ever. So yeah, I think you and I are on the same page, Apostate Nate. Glenn, is your hand back up?
It was. So, like, I don't think Apostate Nate would ever be found guilty of murder based on his stories, but the possibility of getting found guilty for having sex with a farm animal seems just slightly higher than it would be normally. Also,
I can assure you, while the odds are never zero, they're very, very low in this case.
Your Honor, I'll have you know that Apostate Nate was writing about having sexual carnal relations with the goats. And now we have a dead
I heard a
goat, Your
joke
Honor.
one time. Someone said, once you go black stallion, you never go back.
I can imagine that's the case. Yeah, I can imagine that's the case.
By the way, my apologies to everybody on the show right now who in some vague way envisioned me having sex with a farm animal.
I gotta say, I'd kind of forgot it until Glenn brought it back up, because you threw out so many different things. I was like, okay, laundry list. It's hard to remember any specific item, but then it came roaring back as soon as Glenn made me unforget. Thanks, Glenn. Really appreciate that. It's News Debate. I'm Link. Okay, maybe we'll make this final topic, and then we'll end the show. It's been a good show. I used to aim for 2 hours, and now we're 2 hours and 15 minutes. So we have definitely hit my old aim, but as of late, the last several weeks, my shows have been going for so long, even a 2-hour show seems kind of short. Martha tweets, art is subjective and open to interpretation, often reflecting emotions, ideas, or abstract concepts rather than objective truths or factual events. unlike evidence, which is typically concrete and verifiable, art can be symbolic, metaphorical, or personal, making it unreliable. So I would say that it's judged on itself. So just like if you have DNA evidence, that's not symbolic, it's not personal, it's not metaphorical, it is fact. So if you have DNA evidence linking you to a crime, that's pretty damning evidence. But if you have some records, like what happened with Jeffrey Epstein, okay? So there are a lot of people who went to his island. There are a lot of people who, spent time with him. But, rich people hang out with other rich people. So if you were trying to say, oh, you're just like Jeffrey Epstein, and you're talking about some rich guy, and you're like, well, I mean, I knew him. I went to events that he was at one time along with some other people. I was invited to his island, and I was like, I want to go to a private island. So I went. Does that make me like some sort of child rapist? So if that was all the evidence they had, you would not be convicted. But that evidence should be allowed to be presented, travel records, photos, that sort of a thing. So it's judged on what it is. And I think that a jury, and certainly a DA and a defense attorney, will be able to work with that versus DNA, versus texting records, versus other things that are more concrete. But to say it could not be used, I think is completely the wrong idea. Okay, let's share this over on CBS News and then maybe end the show. The Senate approved the mammoth $895 billion National Defense Authorization Act today, despite concerns from some Democrats over a controversial policy restricting gender-affirming care for children of service members. Oh, okay, I guess that's because it's service members. And then 85 to 14 votes, so not very close. The Senate approved the legislation, which passed the House last week. 11 Democrats and 3 Republicans voted against it. The bill now heads to President Biden for his signature. The 1,800-page legislation authorizes funding for the Defense Department fiscal year 2025, but also includes a handful of controversial policies like the gender-affirming care restriction, and lost support from the majority of Democrats in the House. But the Democratic-controlled Senate pushed forward nonetheless. That's funny. Yeah, Democrats, right? Not living up to their own dirty standards. Majority Leader Chuck Schumer notes that while the NDAA isn't perfect, it still includes some very good things that Democrats fought for. But Senator Ed Markey, a Massachusetts Democrat, derided the gender-affirming care restriction earlier this week, calling it the product of a nationwide campaign against trans rights, and argued that the legislation's approval would mark the first anti-LGBTQ law passed by Congress in decades. Apostate Nate, did you have something to throw in?
No. I hit the mute button by accident. But
No
boy, I sort of gulped at saying that was the first legislation like that in a while. That seems like a warning bell of what's around the corner.
Well, I would argue that's the problem of lumping LGBTQ together. So let's look at each letter. L, lesbian. G is gay, which already covers lesbian. So let's get rid of lesbian. B is bisexual. I guess that's different enough that can be in there. T is trans. And Q I've seen as queer. I've also seen as questioning. Q can sometimes be a different letter. I'm sorry, different meaning. But let's look at then GBT and just forget about Q for a moment. Because if Q is queer, then it's just a word people prefer rather than gay. And if it's questioning, then I guess it supports the idea that people don't have to be one of these letters, but they can be kind of in between or something. So G is gay. That is not about identity of gender. It is about who you want to bang. If you are gay and you are a man, you want to bang men. If you are gay and you are a woman, some people identify as a lesbian, but it's the same thing. You want to bang women. If you're bisexual, you want to bang everybody. Okay. T, who do transgender people want to bang? It has nothing to do with who you want to bang. It has to do with how you identify. Why are those the same thing? Why are those grouped together? They're not the same thing at all. It is very counterproductive to group all those people together when some are about who they want to bang and others are about how they identify. And the way that that works out in society is very different. If you are gay or bisexual, it has no bearing on what sport team you play for. It has no bearing on what bathroom you use. If you are transgender, it has a lot to do with what sports team you play for, what bathroom you use, and has nothing to do with who you bang. So why are these things together? So it just so happens that we have, in my opinion, inappropriately grouped all these groups together. And that means that, oh, it's the first anti-LGBTQ law, but it's really at the most the first anti-T law passed by Congress in decades. Not gay, not bi, not lesbian, not queer, not questioning. So I would disagree with that. Now, to say what's going to happen with Trump, I wouldn't assume it's going to affect anything having to do with being nearby, but being trans, yeah, I mean, the Republicans are not down with that. And to be honest, the majority of Americans in many ways are not down with that either. It's been some time now that the majority of Americans have been in support of gay marriage. The majority of Americans have never been in support of many things that transgender people and their very loud and angry allies want. They're very different issues. We should stop conflating them as the same thing. So let me see what this actually did. It really doesn't even say. It's just everybody pissed off or happy about it. Let me see if I can find another thing. See, the fun thing is ChatGPT used to have like a 2-year delay, but now you might be able to ask it this question. So this was the Defense Department spending bill, NDAA. So we'll see if ChatGPT can give me real-time results on something that is not even law yet, but has been sent to Biden's desk. Okay, here it is. Wow, that's fantastic. I did not expect this, but here we go. Over on ChatGPT. Sharing this on twitch.tv/NEWZ debate and also rumble.com/user/NEWZ debate. Defense Authorization Act includes a provision that prohibits the military health insurance program TRICARE. See, this is how bad America is. Even when you serve the government in the military, you don't just have national health care, you have the military health insurance, TRICARE, from covering certain gender-affirming medical treatments for transgender minors. This affects the children of service members who are under 18 years old. So if they're 18, it doesn't affect them, apparently. The provision bans TRICARE from funding treatments for gender dysphoria that could result in sterilization. Language of the provision is somewhat vague, leading to concerns about its potential impact on various gender-affirming treatments. Advocates worry that it could be interpreted to restrict access to a broad range of medically necessary care for transgender youth. And medically necessary is a debatable term. It's met with significant opposition. I can't talk, from LGBTQ advocacy groups, medical professionals, and some lawmakers. Despite these concerns, the NDAA passed both the House and Senate with bipartisan support and now waits for President Biden's signature. All right, Martha has tweeted, military resources are finite. Implementing gender-affirming care diverts revenue and redirects from other healthcare needs of the broader military population, specifically needs in relation to combat preparedness and effectiveness. I don't particularly disagree with that. I think that the amount of people who would be getting this sort of transgender affirming, or as I would say, altering care, is so small that the cost would actually be inconsequential. But you're right. Healthcare generally should be for things in the United States where healthcare is so shitty. It should be for things that have to do with you being alive and healthy, as opposed to how you identify. I would agree with that generally, but that's just because our healthcare is so bad. All right. Does anyone else have any thoughts on this? It's just our final story for today's show. We're going to throw Professor D up here for a final comment.
Well, hello. I think I do.
So yeah, please continue. What do you think about this restriction that seems to have been pretty bipartisan and President Biden might sign into law?
Is this in regards to military or kids? Just recap
whatever you want to discuss, but this is for the children of active military members, and so until they're 18, they're restricted. But the way that I read this was that it's very common for children to become adults but still be under their parents' health care until they're 24 or 26. So it makes me think that by the time they hit 18, these restrictions disappear, because these are about not letting minors get transgender affirming care, transgender altering care, as I would call it.
So I would love it if a trans person was in here to sort of, but I don't know if they're going to come. One thing about gender affirming care and the reason why it's pushed for, and I can kind of understand the sentiment that it's easier for a biological woman to transition into a man and not look quote unquote trans, whereas with a male, like a biological male transitioning to a woman, there's just certain things that testosterone does to a man's body that makes you just look more masculine. For example, a hairline, shoulder broadness. Yes, and the idea is to sort of block that before that takes hold. There is a famous German singer who got gender affirming care when she was 2, and she looks nothing like a trans person. I mean, nothing.
She got gender affirming care when she was 2 years old.
Or somewhere around that time period, but whatever thing, maybe it was 2, maybe, well, maybe it was it was somewhere between the age bracket of before puberty, like 2 or 10, somewhere before that. But she was
10
very
10 is a lot different. Let's please God hope for 10.
Well, whatever the case, it was before puberty took hold. And as we all know, puberty comes with like a lot of transformation. And so I understand wanting, like if a child really is trans, wanting to avoid that look. But my answer to it is, well, why don't we just embrace the fact that trans people, like men who transition into women, even if they don't look woman, and quote, well, maybe we should just start embracing that as a new beauty standard. Me personally, I'm not attracted to that, neither are you, but rather than just implementing it on children to change their looks later, then just tell them to teach them to love their body regardless of what they look like. And I think that's more of an appropriate approach to it, because they will argue that there's a low amount of detransitioners. And maybe that's the case, but there's probably a lot of cases that aren't reported. But let's say that someone does decide to detransition if they had gotten gender affirming care. Well, it's irreversible at that point. So
well, it depends. So if you take puberty blockers, there's more and more information coming out, and we've discussed it on the show over months and years as it's changed. It used to be thought that puberty blockers kind of were perfect. They just blocked puberty, and if you kept taking them, you could stop taking them, and puberty would run its course, or you could keep taking them and take hormones and have surgery and change who you were. But that's not the case. They're finding more issues with puberty blockers. It's not like they discovered that they just give you cancer straight off the bat. It's not that bad, but they're discovering that it's no longer true. And anyone who tells you that it is consequence free at this point is lying, because they know better. But it is low consequence, I think is fair to say. I'm not a doctor, but I can read, and so that's what I've found. And then when it comes to more things that are not reversible, I think that would be if you've had hormones that then change your body. That is not what your body naturally would have done on its own. And of course, if you have surgery. So those things are very difficult, or maybe depending on the case, irreversible. But I think just having, blockers with Professor D is that this is vague, and it says no gender affirming care, or as I would say, gender altering care until you're 18. So does that mean surgery? Does that mean puberty blockers? I think no one knows at this point, and they'll have to figure that out. But yeah, please continue.
Well, another question, and look, I really need to research this particular topic more, but are they saying that military officials who have children still on their insurance can't get a gender affirming care? Because if you're 25 and you're still on your parents' insurance and you're able,
it specifically says 18.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, okay. But I'm just saying that I believe the moment you turn 18, if you want to do what you need to do, that's fine.
Yeah. No, I mean, I have a lot of reservations about gender altering care, as I would call it, and I think is a fair way to describe it as well. But if you're 18, you can vote. You used to be able to smoke cigarettes. A long time ago, you used to be able to drink. You can do porn. I mean, you can get tattoos. What else do we have that children cannot do? Children who are literally 5 days away from turning 18. What are the things that they can't do? Is there anything else I'm missing? There's probably something legal about money or something like that, or taxes, but and it's selective service if you're a guy, because that's of course sexist and we don't talk about it. But the second you hit 18, whether or not I still have reservations about gender altering care, you're an adult. When you're 18, you could get tattoos all over your body, like literally all over your body. So if you can do that, and you could do hardcore pornography while getting tattooed, and just a couple of years ago also smoke cigarettes, which you can't do now till you're older, like, why would I say something about gender altering care? So I
Well,
agree with you. When
so
you're 18, you can do what you want.
I would say that because these cases are the age of consent. Okay, let me preface this. Let me say this much. When you turn, I do not believe. I think the age of consent, just because you are freshly 18, does not mean you know what you're doing.
But that's not what the
My
law does. The law just gives us a time, right?
exactly. You're right. You're right. My sister, who is 23, I'm sorry, she acts like she's 16.
Yeah, I just
If
joined. I was just gonna say the same thing though.
yeah, that's great.
About
So let me finish up with him. We'll throw over with you. We're just
yeah,
ending
totally.
the show, but I want to hear your perspective. If you're 16 and you can pass some sort of test, whatever that is, I would be open to that. Just like if you're in high school and you want to graduate early because you don't like your high school, you want to get away from your parents, whatever it is, usually there's some sort of thing available to you. It may not look good to colleges. It may not be a good idea in the long run, but usually, by the time you're nearing adulthood, there are some pathways for you. So if we could do that, I would be open to it. But once again, generally, it just kind of has to be 18. So yeah, Swifty89, you've joined us here at the end of the show. Professor, do you stay with us? What did you want to add? Swifty, you can unmute yourself.
Yeah, so I just joined because I was just trying to look for a different like place to debate because I was doing one on my account and I was like, oh hey, this is a good one. I guess mine probably shouldn't really be the hot take, but especially because you guys were talking about age of consent. What do you guys think about what the age of consent for not medically transitioning for queer children, but what do you think about for like socially changing?
That's the question.
Do you mean trans? Not queer does not
Yes.
mean yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
I mean trans specifically.
So socially, I don't know that you can make that rule. That's a hard one to even make. But yeah, Professor D, you said you had an idea.
No, I agree with socially transitioning. If a 15-year-old wants to wear a dress, then by God, wear a dress.
Yeah, I have a friend of mine. He's trans, and it always makes me laugh when people make the argument that there were teenagers getting surgery because his dad isn't in the picture, but he cannot legally get even like a legal name change unless both his parents sign off on it. And that's why I laugh at the
I don't know if
fact.
I would call that social though. Social would
No,
just be
but
like
I'm
how
saying
you
like no, I'm
identify
not
and
talking.
your
There's social,
clothes.
yeah. But in addition to like, I just laugh when people say also that like teenagers are getting physical changes to their body at that age when he's 16 now, I think, and he can't legally change even his name. And I have another friend, he's
I don't know the rules about that. Adults have and are still getting physical changes done to their body in the United States. It's becoming more difficult in certain areas, but we
Yeah.
are still federally and certain states who have Europe on this. I mean, it's generally in Europe they're very conservative about letting children decide how to change their bodies. We are much more liberal on that issue than they are.
Yeah, I've gone back and forth on my opinion of it as someone who identifies as Christian but also leans more democratic. I have definitely gone back and forth on it. And personally, like, I've kind of come to the conclusion of we don't like, I think that, like, 25, not 18 or 20, like, I think it should be 25 because that's, like, when medically they say, like, because, like, when you're, like, 22, you could still be treated in the pediatric unit for cancer. So why would you, as a 22-year-old, be allowed to get a surgery, a non-alterable surgery?
So yeah, this is the problem is that
I don't know.
there's convenience, there's history,
There's
and
so
then
much.
there's legality. So like for instance, if you see a pediatrician growing up, you can keep seeing that same doctor much longer than your average person would probably
Yeah,
think is the
until you're
case.
in your, like, mid-20s.
But I think that is because of you want to have that doctor important to know your health, to really have that consistency. And so much is changing when you turn 18. Like maybe it's just great to push that off a little bit later. And then there also might be medical reasons. There's a lot of things we're not thinking about, but just because you're able to identify medically still as a child, if you will, until
Yeah.
whatever time in your 20s, I don't know that that has any bearing on anything else. That might be something that's specifically there for a reason. It might just be that it has never been changed because there was never a specific reason to. If we're going to talk about, should we consider people not adults until sometime in their 20s, there are things like how your brain develops. There are things
Yeah, for
about,
sure.
you don't want to turn everything over to someone when they're 18 because one of the
Yeah.
problems with drinking, for instance, in the United States, in my opinion, versus like Europe, almost everywhere in Europe, kids are drinking much earlier, either legally or legally plus no one cares if you drink even a few years before you're supposed to drink because it's Europe. But the problem is that if you go to Europe and you see young people drinking around the same time that young people would be drinking in the US, it's a very different set of circumstances. It's a very different vibe. Being
Yeah.
around young people drinking in the United States, I think is dangerous. Like people get violent, people make really bad choices. But in Europe, in my experience, by the time you're 21 in Europe, you've probably been drinking for years. Like it's not some crazy thing that you have to do because it's new. You understand what being drunk is. You have a higher tolerance
Yeah.
because you've been drinking for a long time. So if we start getting into that system, even in the United States, if we don't care about brain growth and all these other things, to throw everything at you when you're 18, well, okay, you don't get alcohol, you don't get smoking, but then 18 plus 21, maybe we should have some more of a transitional period. And then, of course, you have body development, brain development, and the fact that, you know, everyone in their 20s now, because how our culture has changed, it's different than being in your 20s back in like 1958 when you were like an
Yeah.
adult and maybe worked at a factory.
Totally. There's definitely, like, a very large different. I travel a lot and I've been to places where, like, I've been to the Caribbean. I haven't been to Europe yet, but I went to like the British Virgin Islands, and there were people there that they've been drinking for years and they know how to, like, control it, like, because they started younger. Like, I don't know how we got on drinking. to be honest, but it's kind of funny that we've gotten here with this like brain development idea. And I go back to what you're talking to with the other guy with the idea of maybe taking like a test when you reach a certain age, like, hey, what level are you at of being able to like make personal responsibility decisions? And I feel like part of that is on the education system, but also the parents.
Yeah. It's how your parents treat you. It's the area you grew up in. It's the friends you have. I mean, it's so many different things. I mean, there are people who turn 18 and they've never worked a day in their life for money. There are people who've been working for many years by the time
Because
they
they
turn
were like,
18.
yeah. Definitely. Like I've seen like I have a friend who she if she works, she's 17 I think now, but she works, but she doesn't have to. She wouldn't have to, and she straight up has told me multiple times. She's like like when we were younger, she used to be like, I'm not gonna work. I don't have to. Like that's not my job as a person. I don't have to do that because I have money. And versus I know someone else who grew up poor and they've been working their butt off since the day they turned 14 and they are just about to be able to buy a car. Like whereas my friend's like, oh, my dad's just gonna buy me a car. You know? Like
Yeah, and
there's a
and
huge
and I
difference
don't
between the
wanna
mentality
create
they were raised in.
a class warfare situation. Like, I did
No,
not grow
totally.
up with a lot of stuff, and I don't want to hate people. Not that I'm saying
No,
you're doing
for sure.
this. I don't wanna hate people
No.
because they did, but it change it can. It
Yeah.
can change who you are, and so if you grow up in one situation, by the time you're 18, you might have a lot of experiences, and someone else who turns 18, they're void of many of those experiences, and so it just goes back to,
Oh,
it
100%.
might just be the situation that we find ourselves in. Let's go back to Professor D. Yeah, what did you have to add? And then I think we'll wrap up the show. We're about to hit 3 hours.
Well, before I say what I need to, before you close the space, I just want to say that I think you have a great podcasting voice, and I would love to see like you actually do a podcast. Yes. Thank you.
Yeah,
I'd
so I
like to thank
used
you.
to, I think more
I'd
than
like
like,
to
sorry, one second, but I think like more than 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago, for a while, I did have an audio podcast of this live show, and, I decided at that point, whatever it was, 3, 4 years ago, 2, 3 years ago, I decided just to transition to, at the time, which was YouTube, because I liked going live, and that was something that podcasts are always, even if they're recorded live, it's a file you download later. And also just the visual component, it just seemed like a cooler thing to me. It was a novelty, and then I've really gotten into displaying things, and so it's kind of come into its own. There's no reason that I can't also do an audio podcast, but for someone who is very fortunate, I have a very strong community. I have a lot of people who support me over on patreon.com/NEWC debate every month. Some people like Patrice have gone above and beyond, which is why I'm doing so much content this month. But that being said, I don't have a large following on Twitter. I don't have a large following on Stereo. I don't have a large following on YouTube before I was kicked off of YouTube for just discussing the fact that Kamala Harris was now taking over for Joe Biden as the Democratic nominee. And so for me, it's like I don't want to have too many options. So that might sound strange. And I'm sure that as a listener, people are like, why don't you just have the podcast, Lee? But for me, I just want to have like one place that people can go, and that's where my content is. And so I just sort of made the executive decision, whether or not it was correct to do. I made the executive decision, and since then I've stuck with it, that I am just doing the video. So you're not wrong. The podcast makes sense. I totally get it, and I think there's still value there. But that's why I don't do it specifically anymore. But yeah, please continue.
Yeah. Well, just keep at it and you'll grow a base. So, this is the final thought I'm going to have on gender affirming care. I do agree that with Swifty and you, maybe there should be some type of test But my only issue is who has the authority to create that test and determine? Because I can promise you right now, Judith Butler, a huge gender studies activist, and Matt Walsh will have completely two different takes on how to create this certain test. So who has the authority to create the test and determine what answers, determine if someone's old enough to go underneath the blade or take puberty blockers? Who has the authority to create that test?
And because that's a really good question, I think we just shouldn't have one. Because I'm sick and tired of people saying that standardized tests are racist and all these other things are discriminatory, because then you just don't have them. And what did they find out? That due to COVID, when colleges decided that they weren't going to require standardized tests anymore, they had less applicants of color, they had less accepted applicants of color. Because the truth has always been that people who oftentimes do not look great as a standard applicant, which usually in the United States would mean they grew up in a good school district, they grew up in a family that had lots of money, which usually in the United States would mean you're white, because immigrants, as they come into the country, they start with less. And there are other reasons for people of color who have been here for generations, but they're all things you can look up and they're all explained through data. And so what they found is that people who were getting into college who came from less great circumstances, they were doing that because even though maybe they didn't go to a great school, they didn't have all these things on their resume that they could point to, they had really good standardized test scores. And then when they stopped making those compulsory, people stopped taking those tests because why would I take the test if I don't need to? And then they didn't look as good as an applicant. So colleges around the country have mostly started requiring these again because they were always a good idea. It was interesting to not need them for a bit, but then we realized, nope, we're going to need them again. So I'm just sick and tired of that sort of debate. And so my answer, I guess, from now on will be no test to see if you can be an adult when you're 16, because then we're going to have the same debate. So you raise a really good point, Professor D, and I'm done. I just, let's just make it 18. If we want to make it 20, if we want to make it 16, I can be down with that because a white person is 16, a black person is 16. Hey, an Indian person, they're also 16. And it's just easier. If it's not perfect, it's still easier. Professor, is your hand still up? Do you have more you want to say? And then we end the show?
No, my hand's not up.
Oh, sorry.
I don't know what.
I'm looking at different screens. So you're right. On my device, your hand's not up, but on my other screen, your hand is up. So that's my fault. Sorry about that. Okay, let me read a few text messages and then we're going to go. Apostate Nate, who's listening, says he's tied up at the moment, but he has his final thought. Sometimes in life, the way of doing things has to involve arbitrary cutoff points. These cutoff points are useful, but never perfect. I agree. For example, I teach English comp for a living, and like other schools, I work with a grading system. Yes, so your grading system is not perfect, and maybe it could be even improved, but especially in the United States, where generally it's kind of across the board, this is how classes work. Other countries have different grading systems. It just is what it is at this point, and you just work with it. So I completely agree with you. Martha also tweets, great chat. Look forward to more. I have to go tend to the dog babies. Yes, you've mentioned something like that before. Apparently you got some animals over there. So Martha, always great to have you. Thanks for being part of the show. And I look forward to my next shows when you and everybody else can continue to join. Okay, I think that's everybody. Yeah, that's good. Big thanks to everybody who was part of the show today. Like I said, I'm not someone who has an immense following on any single platform, but I have a very strong community nonetheless. And I've been doing this show now for something, I don't know, like 4 years. I haven't really counted it, but certainly since COVID. And so if you like the show and you want to give back, Patreon twitter.com/NEWZ debate. And I reward my Patreon supporters by including them first, reading their text messages first, bringing them up on Twitter Spaces, or if you're Bjorn, he's the one person who uses stereo. And I'm trying to find more ways all the time to bring value to the people who support this show. But once again, everybody can speak on the show, no matter whether or not you're a Patreon supporter. And I forgot to mention it today, but everybody can send text messages and leave a voice message at my voicemail system, 323-250-0867. 323-250-0867. I debuted it at the beginning of the month. I have really enjoyed doing it. A lot of people are using it, but I have not been promoting it as much as I could. So I'll try to keep doing that. Okay, I think that's going to do it. Yeah, I think we're all set up here. Big thanks to everybody. And once again, look forward to doing some more shows. Follow me on twitter.com/NEWZ debate and my Discord server that you can join for free by going to bit.ly/NEWZ debate for all my future announcements about my future shows. Until then, take care and bye-bye.